for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Good evening, Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Yeah. How you doing? I would like to welcome everybody listening. Oh, today's Wednesday, June 8th, 2022. I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer, and NX Networks, Race Hobbs. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? How you doing? All right. Tonight, excited. We have very special guest. Freddie Silva is with us. We're going to be discussing his latest work. I have it right here. It's called Scotland's Hidden Sacred Past. Oh, man, we have a conversation that's about to go down tonight, so stay right there. He'll be with us at the bottom of the hour. Tomorrow night is another Fader night with open lines all night long. Yeah. What a great week on the show. And I think everybody can tell I have just been in an amazingly cool, great mood. And I was thinking today, because I just got my official California out-of-time license plates, as everybody knows, Back to the Future. And yeah, man, for the Fade to Black Jeep. And there you go. And I was thinking today a little bit about time travel. And, well, you have to, right? and it's something that I talk about a lot because we're already in the future, right? Right now. I mean, everything that I just said, you can't even go back that far. We don't have that ability. And, you know, and today I was thinking to myself, if I could go back in time, you know, how far back would I go? And you know what I said to myself? Can we talk? Right? I'm just sharing my personal thoughts today as I was drinking coffee with the hummingbirds. I would go back and relive this past weekend. It was epic. It was just, I gotta say, Billy Carson. I mean, of course, it was the premiere and it was the movie, and that was great watching that. It was just the entire event, just no drama, nothing but fun. Billy and Elizabeth, you know, they go first class, and so all of that. I mean, it was the friendship and the hanging out and the conversations, and it was just a perfect weekend. So much so that I just turned around and no sleep, just got on a plane, and it just, my energy level was right there, and got back to LA just thinking to myself, man, this morning I was in Detroit at a premiere and it was like that. And I've been in a great mood ever since. Nothing has stopped. Okay. So, but that's what I would do. Time travel. It's weird. we're always on, is there a difference between the past and the future, right? Because it's happening all the time, right? It never stops, right? There is, quantum level, right? If you zoomed in on time, could you get to the point of where the past and the future is happening? No, I don't think so. It's instant, and you can't even go back that far. You can't even 5 seconds, 1 second. It's weird. Oh, because of this. Just got but I would go back, man. This weekend was perfect. All right, tonight Freddie Silva is with us. We're going to talk about his latest work. It is called Scotland's Hidden Sacred Past. Nobody is better at lost history and teaching than Freddie Silva. He'll be with us at the bottom of the hour. And coming up next weekend, not this weekend, but next weekend, I'll be hosting Disclosure Fest a week from this Saturday, June 18th, right here in Los Angeles, California. Visit disclosurefest.org for your tickets and information. All right, let's move this over here. Let's get this out of the way. Let's put that there. I'm ready to go. All right. Now, in the description box below, I also have links for the MUFON Symposium going down in Denver this year. And if you click on that link, it'll take you over to the MUFON website. And if you are in the United States and you get the streaming package, and it's all right there, just click on the link, you're going to get a free Travis Walton DVD. That's right, the Travis Walton documentary. And that's just for you Fadernauts. Just for you Fadernauts. So the link is on the description box below, and we've got some commercials running, and you can check that out too as well. Okay, so it's going down in Denver, and if you can go in person if you want, but there you go. Okay, follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. The Sandbox is hashtag F2B on Twitter, live in front of me. Third Stone, you two, Triscale, you guys are out of control. You're the very best. Olivia, my neighbor, David, all of you guys, man. Just head over to hashtag F2B. The Sandbox is incredible, and it's a great place to hang out. So follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Let's get to the breaking news. Investors wanting to get their hands on stocks of SpaceX's satellite mega constellation will have to wait a bit longer. CEO Elon. Oh, man. Freudian slip. CEO Elon Musk recently told employees that he's not likely to make SpaceX's Starlink public for another 3 to 4 years. All of this announced today by CNBC because they got some leaked documents. During an all-hands meeting of the company's employees last week, he reportedly said that SpaceX's initial public offering, that IPO, won't be for another 3 to 4 years from now, according to an audio recording of the meeting leaked to CNBC. Musk declared that Starlink needs to be, quote, in a smooth sailing situation with good predictability, end quote. He had initially planned to take Starlink public as early as this year, according to a 2019 email to employees also leaked to CNBC. But now, the billionaire seems to be wary of taking his internet mega constellation public. Quote, being public is definitely an invitation to pain. And the stock price is just distracting, end quote. All of that from the meeting last Thursday. All right, J.J. Abrams back in the news. His science fiction drama series called Demimonde has been scrapped by HBO. The news follows a slew of cancellations as the streamer Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav reevaluates some of the studio's richer overall deals. The executive has been tasked with cutting $3 billion from the newly merged company's budget. And according to The Hollywood Reporter, he's been unhappy with the lack of output from the director and his $250 million deal that was signed back in 2019. Demimonde received a straight-to-series order right there at HBO in 2018 after a bidding war with Apple. Rumored to have a very high budget, the show was considered to be a top priority until recently, when studio execs watched his crap series, UFO. Yeah. David Attenborough has received a second knighthood. That's two. A second knighthood for services to television broadcasting and conservation. The prestigious Knight Grand Cross was bestowed upon the 96-year-old naturalist by the Prince of Wales. Best known for making nature documentaries such as The Blue Planet, which is amazing, Attenborough is considered a national treasure in the United Kingdom. In 2019, he set up the Earthshot Prize with Prince William, which aims to inspire innovative solutions to the most pressing environmental challenges facing the planet. As part of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations, Attenborough delivered a message about climate change and the planet, which was projected onto the front of Buckingham Palace. Right on, David. That is really cool. Now, are you ready for this? One of the 18 golden segments of the James Webb Space Telescope's giant mirror was hit by a micrometeoroid between May 23rd and May 25th, according to an update from NASA. NASA says that everything is still on track to share its first high-resolution, full-color images next month on July 12th. The May impact event was larger than anything the team tested or would have been able to model while Webb was still on the ground. Webb has already exceeded expectations since launching in December, and the telescope is preparing for the beginning of science operations. Webb will be able to peer inside, of course, the atmospheres of exoplanets and observe some of the first galaxies created after the universe began by observing them through infrared light, of course, which humans cannot see. Yeah. Let's get this show cracking on this day in history. OTD. 1949. George Orwell's 1984 is published. The novel's all-seeing leader, known as Big Brother, becomes a universal symbol for intrusive government and oppressive bureaucracy. Yeah. 1949. I just recently, it was about 2 months ago, I watched 1984 again, the movie. Man. Yeah. The movie is great. Fate or fact? Are you ready? This is a good one. They're all good. John Lech Johansson created software that decodes the content scramble system that is used for DVD licensing enforcement. He was taken to court on computer hacking charges. That's right. But he argued that he said, hey, I own these DVDs. I can do what I want. He was acquitted of all charges. And that is your fate or fact. You can write him if you want, John Lech Johansson. When was the last time you bought a DVD? Do you have the ability to watch a DVD? Oh, half of you are gamers. Half of you have PlayStation 4s and 5s. So you can still, can you do PlayStation 5s still play DVDs? I know the 4s do. Yeah. I mean, do you have the ability to watch a DVD? I have got boxes of DVDs. I don't know the last time. The last time I watched a DVD was Dark Skies. Yeah, Bryce Zabel gave me, I think it was Bryce, gave me the collector's edition of this 2 seasons, 1 season, 2 seasons. And that was the last time. And that was probably 5-6 years ago. I have no idea. What do they look like? They look like a CD, right? Wow. Yeah, I'm going to leave that right there. Tonight, very special guest. Freddie Silva is with us to discuss his latest work. It is called Scotland's Hidden Sacred Past. Tomorrow night is another Fader night with open lines all night long. All right. Now it's time for me to hit this River Moon coffee. rivermoonwellness.com. Today, I opened up a fresh bag of Fade to Black blend, and I have what I do. I think I've posted pictures, so it's not a big secret, but I have vacuumed containers on my counter that I keep different blends of coffee in. Game Changer, Fade to Black blend, and then I'll have some exotic something, and I change it up. And but today I had to fill the Fade to Black blend container, and I opened the bag, filled it up, and then I went outside. I had somebody here. That's another story. But anyway, I came back in the house. The smell of coffee beans. Oh, man. I mean, okay, so Febreze. This is my twisted thought today. I'm glad I remembered this. Febreze, they need to do coffee bean. If Febreze sold coffee bean spray, forget about potpourri, Caribbean mist, or whatever they call it, whatever their scents are, apple, cinnamon. I made that up. Coffee bean Febreze. Hey, we should sell that. Wait a minute. We should have Fade to Black blend air spray. Whoa. Okay, I'm going to let that go. I'm going to follow up on this. That's got to be possible, right? All right. Let me get back to this Fade to Black blend. Ken Priest, man, you're a trip. Ken Priest is a trip. Tomorrow for Fader night, I'm going to wear my Ken Priest hat that he gave me. It's very cool. rivermoonwellness.com, Fade to Black blend, the best coffee in the world. Links are over at jimmychurchradio.com. They're in the description box below. You know what to do. It is truly the best coffee in the world. All right. Astronomers. This is my twisted mind. Astronomers have detected a mysterious repeating fast radio burst emanating from a dwarf galaxy located 3 billion light years away. This time, this cosmic object is distinctive. Stay with me. A study detailing the findings published in the journal Nature earlier today. Now, I went and read it, most of it. Astronomers detected the object named FRB 190520 when it released a burst of radio waves on May 20th, 2019. The researchers used the 500-meter aperture spherical radio telescope, otherwise known as FAST, in China, and discovered the burst in the telescope data in November of 2019. Now, when they conducted follow-up observations, the astronomers noticed something unusual. The object was releasing frequent, repeating bursts of radio waves that didn't stop. In 2020, the team used the National Science Foundation's Carl G. Jansky Very Large Array, or the VLA, of telescopes to pinpoint the origin of the burst before zeroing in on it using the Subaru telescope in Hawaii. This is crazy. This is complex. Subaru's observations in visible light showed that the burst came from the outskirts of a distant dwarf galaxy. The VLA observations revealed that the celestial object constantly released weaker radio waves between the repeating bursts. The initial detection and subsequent tracing of FRB 121102 back to its origin in a small dwarf galaxy more than 3 billion light years away was a breakthrough in astronomy. We need to really think about this for a second. It was the first time astronomers were able to learn about the distance and environment of these mysterious objects. FRB 190520 is the only persistently active FRB, meaning that it has never turned off. Now, although this story is huge, and it's an amazing discovery, I'm sure you're asking yourself right now, you're saying, hey, Jimmy, what's the big deal, man? You announce something like this once a week. Yes, I do. But that's not what is important. What is important is that we actually think about this stuff. A couple of days ago, I told you that octopuses like to decorate their homes with found pirate treasure coins that they find in shipwrecks. You remember that? Pretty cool. It is. It's intelligence. But it's not pondering FRBs from 3 billion light years away. Or one step further, detecting, listening, and finding their source from 3 billion light years away. That is incredible to me. If you think about it, our brains are unbelievably perfect. I don't know what happened. I don't. And I don't know when the change occurred. But at some point, we just went and started thinking about this stuff. Monkeys, beautiful, cute, cool. Chimpanzees, whales, dolphins, right? Huskies. You know what I mean? They're brilliant. They're smart. They're unbelievably cool. But they're not thinking about FRBs. They're not tracking a fast radio burst 3 billion light years away. It's incredible to me. We are the only species. And if you think about it, our brain, right? Think about it. Stone Age, husband and wife, and the sun is setting, and the wife comes up and she's like, hey, are you going to go get dinner or not? The kids are hungry. I'm hungry. You're just sitting here. Hold on. Do you think we're alone in the universe? What? Do you think there's life out there on those stars? Wife forgets about dinner. Maybe. I don't know. How did this happen? An octopus collecting coins from ancient Spanish shipwrecks to decorate the bedroom in their home is amazing. But that octopus is not contemplating the size of the universe. It's incredible to me. So when I bring you these news stories and I actually present the fact that we are able to detect radio signals and pinpoint their source from 3 billion light years away, and then think about what they mean and what they are, is insane. It's insane to me. And here's the other part that has to go with this. I'm so glad Freddie Silva's on the show tonight. I love to think. I just love to think. And the ability for my brain to go here is just incredible. Incredible. So you have the size of the universe. 95 billion light years across. How did we figure that out? And so the opposite of that, right? The size of the universe. And the opposite is the ability to think about atoms and the quantum. And the opposite of the size of the universe is the absolute very, very, very small. It's mind-blowing. Our brain. You know, and we go to a subject like Plato's cave. I'll just lay it out there, right? And what happens, you know, if you have, you know, some infant that was raised in the jungle by apes, and they come out into society, the brain is still the same. And the same wonderment is going to happen when you introduce a teenager that was raised in the jungle by apes, and you bring them out and show them streets and cars and people and TV and clothes and whatever, right? It's the same brain. The same things are going to be thought about. The contemplating and the pondering. It's unbelievable. And that's why Freddie Silva is on the show. And I thought about all of that today. It is incredible. I love learning and conversation, and I love our brains. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Freddie Silva is here. We're going to be talking about his new book, Scotland's Hidden Sacred Past. I have it right here. You can go to his website and check it out and get your own copy. Tomorrow night's another Fader night with open lines all night long. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Be right back after this short break. Stay with us.
This is Nicole Church, daughter of you-know-who, and you're listening to Fade to Black on JimmyChurchRadio.com and the Game Changer Network.
You're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the X.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net.
Introducing the Game Changer blend from Rivermoon Coffee that delivers a customized blend made specifically for the Fadernauts. If the game is rigged, change the game. It's a bolder cup with some bite. Game Changer is the coffee of choice for those that prefer an organic dark roast that is slightly lighter and milder, but it's still dark. With wild notes of pecans and chocolate with a rich, balanced, full-bodied cup that is roasted to perfection for a great coffee to start your day, as an after-dinner coffee or anywhere in between. artisan, small batch roasted to perfection. USDA certified organic, all River Moon coffee is freshly roasted and packaged in the USA. Just go to rivermooncoffee.com or click on the banners over on our site and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today. rivermooncoffee.com.
This is the only way forward.
This is Fade to Black. Make contact.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you can get our podcast for just $2 per month. All you have to do is click on the podcast banner over at jimmychurchradio.com.
Do you have an interest in the paranormal? Then you'll love the unxnetwork.com. The X is your streaming audio and video for everything supernatural, strange, and mysterious, like UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts, and so much more. From hosts like Jimmy Church, Whitley Strieber, Micah Hanks, and Christina Gomez. Visit the unxnetwork.com show page for a complete list of all the paranormal programs you'll find on the X. Be sure to follow us on Twitter for updates at KUNXDB. Follow our Facebook group, UNX Network. Find the podcast on Spotify, iHeart, Audible, and Apple Podcast. It's time.
It's new.
It's the X.
9 out of 10 geneticists agree.
Fade to Black is not your father's radio show on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Manson. You're listening to Jimmy Church Radio.
All right, welcome back. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black tonight. Freddie Silva is with us, excited. Good conversation is straight ahead. And here's the deal. Freddie, he's a best-selling author, leading researcher, ancient civilizations, restricted history, sacred sites and their interaction with consciousness, all of that. And he's also a leading expert on crop circles. He has published 7 books in 6 languages, described by one CEO as perhaps the best metaphysical speaker in the world right now. For 2 decades, he's been an international keynote speaker with notable appearances at the International Science and Consciousness Conference, the International Society for the Study of Subtle Energies and Energy Medicine, and the Association for Research and Enlightenment. In addition to appearances on Gaia, History Channel, BBC, and radio shows such as Coast to Coast and Fade to Black, he is the best. He is also a documentary filmmaker, art photographer, and he has got a Fender Stratocaster. His website is invisibletemple.com. And I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black the one and only Freddie Silva. Hey, Freddie.
You brought up the Fender Strat.
I had to do it. This is the deal. I get to read your book in your voice.
Hey, you have to put on a New Jersey accent and behave to be like somebody else.
It's a trippy thing, man. It's I'm reading it and you're just narrating, and it is just a fantastic way to go.
It's funny. I always wanted John Hurt to narrate my books, and then the bastard decides to selfishly die. So I always wrote with his voice in my head, but now I've got to make up for the fact he's no longer alive. A great voice, a great talent.
Great. John Hurt, good choice, man. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Congratulations, by the way. I just wanted to get this out of the way. The premiere for the Black Knight satellite happened this weekend. Oh. And your contribution to the film was stunning. And here's the crazy part for me. And I want you to absolutely take this the wrong way. Okay. All right. So as we shot the film, I'm there for Freddie, and I'm standing in the background, and I get to listen to you get interviewed for a couple of hours, right? And I absorbed it. It was so much. We had such a great time. But here's the deal. So the film rolls this weekend, and your section is there, and I'm watching. I'm like, Freddie wasn't that smart, was he? Holy crap! I don't remember it being this good, and it was really. And
the accent. It's the accent.
I know, clever editing.
Yeah.
But your contribution to the film, because everybody had their moment, and there's so many great parts in the film. But your contribution was fantastic. So for me, I worked on that film for 3 years, and I just want to thank you for making that film so much better. And it was
well.
Yeah. Freddie wasn't that smart, man. What happened?
It's all in the edit and the big vowels, lots of strange words that haven't been used in 300 years. It makes you look so good.
Yeah. I wrote some of your words down. I got to use that.
Fibrillation. That's a really good one.
Right.
And you make up words as you go along as well, just to make it sound like you're an authority on something.
Is that how you do it? Okay. All right. That's good. That's good.
Well, years ago, there was a famous sitcom in Britain called Blackadder with Rowan Atkinson, one of the best comedians in Britain. And his job was basically to take down anybody of a higher status than himself, which is just about everybody. So he was a very facetious, very sarcastic guy, classic British stuff. And Dr. Johnson walks in one day, very proud of the fact that he's created a book with every word in the English language. So, of course, that sets him off, and he starts saying, "Every word, Dr. Johnson? Yes, every word in the English language. Well, let me be the first to offer you my most profound contrafibulations." What? He starts making up words and starts pulling the rug from under Dr. Johnson's dictionary. It's so funny.
I got to remember that too. That's actually really, really cool. I'm not smart enough to do that on the fly. There are, when you see a great comedian, somebody that, improv, a Dave Chappelle or a Bill Burr or, any of the greats from the past, Lenny Bruce, and I really have an appreciation for somebody whose mind is so sharp where it just goes, right there instantly. And I love that. I don't have that ability. I can carry on a conversation, but you know what I mean? It's, just have a big.
Robin Williams was particularly good at it. And I think it takes a certain amount of lack of confidence in order to do that, because you're overcompensating for something that is inevitably sort of missing or subdued within yourself. So you project that strength through being very quick-witted, but also it requires someone who travels the world a lot and sees the landscape of different people. So you have this rich tapestry that you remember from your travels. I mean, when I was growing up, I was very, very shy, very hard to make friends with, and also make friends of anyone. So my landscape was very much narrowed by my parents and the experience that they wouldn't let me out of the house unless I had to go to school and back home again. So my world is very sort of sheltered. But once I got out into the big world and spent every moment traveling as I do now, I'm a very, very different person. And I sort of developed that also to compensate for, a certain lack of confidence in certain things, which still haunts me to this very day. But I see that in comedians as well, because it's their protection. But by doing that, they also become better than us. They are really, truly incredible people.
So that explains why I've had to work so hard at our friendship. Now, let me ask you this, Freddie.
Keep drinking heavily. That's the only thing that works.
I'm reading the book, and the illustrations that are here, the photographs, and there's like something on every page. But I couldn't help myself, but having a crazy thought. So I want to start with this. If I went and bought, say, 500 acres in Scotland, am I guaranteed a megalithic 2,000-year-old observatory on my property?
No, you're guaranteed a 5,000-year-old megalith.
Right. It's kind of like that, isn't it?
It very much is. And Scotland, and specifically the islands of Scotland, because contrary to common belief, the civilization didn't go from Europe up through Britain and ends up in the north of Scotland. It actually begins on the periphery, on the Scottish Islands, and it goes inward. That's what I found very bizarre, but also because of the position and the location and the extraordinary weather that you have to go through to get there. These are some of the best preserved sites in the world, and that's what's beautiful about it. They're hard to reach, not easy to find, and when you get there, they're perfectly intact. I mean, they haven't, like in Britain, succumbed to a lot of human folly. Years and years of politics and fighting and war. The Second World War didn't help with all the bombing. So they've been out of the way. They've also been sort of covered with peat. So in that part of the world, all that plant debris builds up and condenses into something that when you put it out, cut it out of the ground and put it into the sun, you can roll it up like turf and use it to heat your house. And as the culture starts moving off the islands onto the mainland, when the weather changed about 2,500 BC, those sites began to be covered with this incredible amount of plant matter, dead plant matter, and it helped protect them. So to the point where, Callanish, one of the most incredible stone circles in the world, is absolutely preserved. And the local villagers thought they had a few stones, beautiful little stones in a little circular motion. Well, they didn't realize how big and how important it was until they began to cut away the layers of the peat to heat the houses. And then they realized, it's not just a circle. It's a big stone circle with 19-foot tall stones. And 4 avenues that shaped like a cross. A lot of them had no idea that was actually there. And that's what's the beauty about it. It's so well preserved. And given the footprint of land per capita, I mean, I can't think of any other place apart from Malta that has so many sacred sites per square mile. Malta's like the other one as well.
I remember in one of your previous books, you had that mapped out, and I was like, oh my goodness, you don't have any idea. It's not like dozens, it's thousands.
Yeah,
right.
And a lot of them are actually underwater now, which is the strangest thing. If you look at the maps of Europe, for example, you'll see that the congregation of sites tends to be along the coasts. Now, you go to Karnak in Brittany, and you realize that when you go up to the beach, the stone rows end at the beach, and they actually reappear at low tide, and they go under the ocean, and then they reappear on an island 5 miles away. So what you're seeing on land is now the people are actually withdrawing because of sea level rise around 3000 BC, because there's a 25-foot rise in sea level around then, and talk about climate change. So they're moving inland to get away from the flooding. So that's what we're looking at today, is the remains of a civilization. And it's the same in the Scottish Islands. Orkney today looks like a big jigsaw puzzle. And what the archaeologists are realizing is that what we see today on Orkney is the vestiges of an entire culture which is now submerged, and they keep digging up stuff all over the place. So it's a very exciting place to go looking for the remote past.
Yeah, one of these days I'm going to make it to Orkney.
You should.
Well, I'm going to be in Manchester next year hosting the Awakening Conference.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
And yeah, it's going to be great. And here's
a good scotch there.
But I'm going to have time before and after to go out and get some stuff done. Got to go to Edinburgh. I got to do Stonehenge. I would like to get to Avebury.
You have to get to Avebury.
Right. And now I can't remember the name of the movie, but this is what we're talking about. It came out a couple of years ago, and it was the telling of the story around 1930, I'm guessing, semi-modern. A rich family, got a big house, and they got a mound on the property, right?
As one does.
I wonder what's there. And so they bring out a friend, an amateur archaeologist, and they start digging into this. They got a frigging ship, right?
Oh, I remember that. Yes, it was about the Viking ship up in Norfolk.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a beautiful movie.
It's a great movie.
Yeah,
it's about a hill on the property, right?
Yeah.
That the kids played on.
There's a Viking ship buried inside it. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Ship. And like I said, I just got to go there and buy some property and see what I can find.
Good luck with that. You'll be if you can buy an outhouse in Britain, you're a rich person. The property there is beyond ridiculous.
I'm not going to lie. I've been looking at property. I'm not going to lie. I've been checking.
The pound has gone down 12 cents against the dollar. This might be your best chance. I mean, the euro, you stand a better chance with the euro. It's almost on par with the dollar. But Britain remains totally out of touch for most people. I mean, I can't afford to go home.
Yeah. If you get outside of London, it's not so bad.
It's bad.
It's bad.
The places that you can afford, you don't want to live there. Trust me.
Now, I want to start. I can't start at the beginning. That would be going back 100,000 years. But let's go back because you've dropped some numbers in the book, and you just mentioned some pretty incredible things. Where right now, where we're talking about construction and civilization at 2000 BC, 2500 BC, that stuff that's been accurately done, and now we're talking about 5,000 years ago. And that's a pretty incredible statement. So when do you think these migrations started? They didn't start at 2500 BC. They predated that. So what are we talking about when we, as this conversation unfolds tonight, when did all of this start?
Well, the latest archaeological evidence shows that there were people living on Orkney and the western Scottish Islands by about 6000 BC. And again, it just depends where you're digging and how lucky you are to find something. We don't know the full story, but slowly it's beginning to come through. Now, I thought that was quite impressive until someone actually dredged up human implements and tools between the Isles of Orkney and Shetland, which is even further closer to Iceland. And that was in sediment that's over 13,000 years old. In other words, before the Ice Age, the last Ice Age, people were already living in the Arctic Circle and making a good living up there because the Gulf Stream is what keeps that place habitable, you see. It misses the coast of Maine, which is incredible, but in Scotland, you can actually go skinny dipping in September, and it's much warmer than in North America, so that's what keeps that whole thing going. But the official date for when the temples were kind of appeared in Orkney and places like that is about 3,500, 4,000 BC at the outmost. But it's a pure guess because they're looking at the debris that's left over on these sites. For example, at the Ring of Brodgar, which is one of the biggest stone circles in Britain and very much intact, they found that the whole area had been leveled by hand. So they got down to the bedrock, leveled the bedrock, and then just for fun, decided to build a massive ditch. It's about 20 feet deep by about 14 feet wide, literally carved out of the bedrock, and it holds water. So it was used like a big mirror around the stone circle. You can just imagine the impression that it gave back then. But they found that when they dug to the bottom of this particular enclosure, they began to date debris, and they got it to about 4,000 BC, 3,000, 4,000 BC. The problem is, and this is my argument, anyone who went to that trouble to build that stone circle and all the alignments and all the tooling that was required, 160,000 hours of labor, is not going to sit there and watch debris fall in and cover their work. They're going to keep it clean. So my argument is that the earliest date archaeologically for carbon dating is the day after the site had stopped being used. And that's when debris falls in. There's rabbits that fall in there, chickens fall in there. Right. And they get covered up by silt, and that's what we're dating. The next stage in the discovery of the dates is that you have to look at archaeoastronomy, which is every temple on the face of the earth was built to commemorate a specific point in time in the sky. Now, that's the hard part because you got to figure out what it was in the sky that they were looking at. Now, in the case of Ring of Brodgar, it's not too difficult. It's the stones calibrate the solar and lunar cycles. There are 56 original stones, and that usually calibrates the solar and lunar cycles, I believe, every 8 years. So it's a very regular system, just like they had in Stonehenge. So the next thing you do is you try to work out what's around it, because if it's a circle, you can't point it at anything, because you could be pointing in any direction in a circle.
Right.
But it's aligned to two other stone circles, you see. They form a big line, except the line is actually kinked this way. And when you look at it from the sky, from the bird's eye view, you think, wait a minute, there's two big stone circles and one little one, and the little one is ever so slightly off phase. And you begin to realize, this is too good to be true. Am I looking at the mirror image of the belt stars of Orion, just like the Giza pyramids? Now, at the top stone circle, which all the stones have gone now, but there's a box there. So if you were sitting inside that box, you have a perfect view of this intercardinal horizon, and you can see this big natural cup that's formed by the distant mountains into which an object is supposed to be rising or setting. So now you have to sit there and calculate what was going into that shape all these thousands of years ago. Now, I tried the sun, didn't quite work. The moon, yes, but the moon comes around every 19 years. That doesn't give you an accurate date. But the one thing that the local people, the ancient builders, were apparently renowned to be associated with, and this is part of folklore, was Orion, which is something that crops up in every single ancient culture. So I thought, what's happening to Orion? When do we get a good bead on Orion on that particular bowl on the horizon? And in the winter solstice in 5300 BC, for the first time, those belt stars rise out of that bowl for 15 minutes, and then they descend again. And I thought, oh, so if I'm looking in this box, I'm sitting in this box in a stone circle inside the mound, that's the view that I'm getting. Now, here's the fun part. If you look at the actual trajectory of the belt of Orion, as it appeared in 5300 BC, and look at the stone circles on the ground, they mirror each other in reverse. So now you've got a two-part connection. And the third part connection is that if you take a bead from the two main stone circles, literally draw a line through the center of both stone circles, you end up in Giza, right at the three pyramids, which I thought was an incredible connection. So then I thought, well, what would happen if I take the plan of the three pyramids, which of course are a mirror of Orion 5,000 years before that, as proven by Beauval and Gilbert. We actually take the blueprint of the three pyramids, overlay them over the three stone circles on Orkney, and the summits hit the center of each one of them, including the one that's off center.
Is that right? Is that right?
An incredible moment. I mean, it's just sitting with the land, letting the land talk back to you, because I don't take credit for all this. Something else is coming down and putting these images in my head, and the rest is mathematics and pure calculation. So yeah, there is this constant mirroring of the Egyptian pyramids on the landscape in Orkney, but also a mirroring of the constellation to which the top stone circle is looking at in 5300 BC. I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, I have. When I go outside, and it's sad because this part of the year I don't have the Orion phenomenon and above me, but for the first 6 months of the year, it's there. You can see it. When I walk outside, I cannot help but look at Orion. It's really strange. Now, if that's me, I mean, it's about as majestic as anything in the night sky, and there's a lot of cool stuff up there. But if it's standing out for me, Freddie, in ancient times, that has to be the most extraordinary thing in their life, right? It has to be. So it's to turn around and project that into your community seems very natural. I want to do it in my backyard. I want to build my little Orion, temple. And I'm not kidding about this. Orion is unbelievable, and it would have to have the most extraordinary symbolic meaning to all of the ancient cultures. It's a given, right?
But once you buy your 500 acres in England, you can do whatever the hell you like. Because you're a lord of the land. It's true. And in fact, I actually, during all my years when I was looking at the connection between ancient cultures and the parallel civilization that was living here before the flood. So I was doing my research for the last book, which is The Missing Lands, to find out more about the gods. What do we call them gods? Where did they come from? Where they were living? And every single indigenous culture talks about the importance between this civilization and Orion. And it's no matter where you go in the world, and the stories overlap. They're not repetitive. They overlap, and they fill the gaps. So, for example, when you go to Japan and you look at the red torii arch that defines the entrance into sacred space, it's one of those iconic things when you go to Japan. You can't miss them. These big wooden arches with a cross member on top. It turns out that the cross member is supposed to be symbolic of the three belt stars of Orion. And when you cross through the center of the goalposts, the center is called the half of the universe. It's the place from where the gods originally came. Now, if you go to Yucatan and you explain that to the Maya, they said, well, yes, we call it the half of the universe, which is what NASA calls M42, the nebula. And they said, and I quote NASA, it's the biggest star-forming region that we know in the galaxy. So what is it that these people knew back then that we don't know today? And Japanese culture, when you look at the earliest transcripts of sacred literature, they go back to at least 8,000 BC, at a time after the flood, when these gods arrived from a sinking land somewhere in the Pacific to restart civilization. And it's the same story in Polynesia, it's the same story in Europe, same story in Egypt, in Armenia. It's always this association with Orion. And if you talk to, if I was having this conversation with Clifford Mahuti, the late Clifford Mahuti, bless him, lovely man. And he said, yeah, in the Zuni culture and the Hopi culture, we say that they originally came from Orion, and so did human beings at one point. This is a long, long time ago. And we had special means to go from A to B. But then, after many thousands, maybe tens of thousands of years, we forgot how to do that physically. So they built special buildings and locations where the laws of physics were changed to allow them to take their body back to Orion and back. And they said sometimes they would take a lucky human with them to show them how to live a better life, so that when they came back to hunter-gatherers, they'd go, hey, we don't have to live like people, like animals in a cave. We don't have to drag the women by the hair and eat meat forever. We have a better way of doing things. And that's how they did it, very slowly. And then after that, in Easter Island in New Zealand, they talk about how the connection got more remote, so they had to rely on shamanism to go there and back. And now they're saying they communicate with the old gods from the belt stars of Orion and beyond through the shaman in the tribe when they link the mind to another. So there is that very, very strong connection historically between indigenous cultures and this particular junction in the sky.
Let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, the one and only Freddie Silva, is with us. You can go to his website. The links are below. We're discussing his new book, Scotland's Sacred, Hidden Sacred Past. Here it is. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
You're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the X.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and this year, June 18th, 2022, the Disclosure Fest Foundation presents the Mass Meditation Initiative. It's Saturday, June 18th from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., one day only at the Los Angeles State Historic Park in downtown Los Angeles, California, right next to Chinatown. I'm hosting the event again this year with music performances by Trevor Hall, The Desert Dwellers, Poran Key, and many, many more on 4 separate stages. There's 16 stages in total, over 30 acres in downtown Los Angeles, with vendors and tents and presentations and workshops with Billy Carson, Adam Apollo, Lori Spagna, Laura Eisenhower, Brad Olson, David Palmer, and many, many more. It's all simple to do. Just go to disclosurefest.org for all of your tickets, information, and a full schedule of the day's events. Again, disclosurefest.org. Do you want to be an official Fadernaut? Of course you do. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Just go to our membership section at jimmychurchradio.com. Fadernauts, when you think about the future of our country and where we're headed, do you wonder about the food supply? I do. Disruptions in the food supply chain could be disastrous, and they usually occur with little warning. That's why the smartest thing you can do today is to stockpile emergency food, water, and other essentials. I personally recommend My Patriot Supply. They're the nation's largest emergency preparedness company, serving millions of customers for more than a decade. In fact, they're the only source my family trusts for our preparedness plan. You should too. Right now, save 20% off a full 4-week supply of delicious meals that provide 2,000 calories a day. Saving 20% helps too, doesn't it? Especially now. So go to preparewithjimmy.com and get ready. That's preparewithjimmy.com. There's no time to lose. Do it now.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Freddie Silva, talking about his book, Scotland's Hidden Sacred Past. Take notes, everybody. Tonight is the conversation where we get our education on. That's what I always tell everybody, Freddie. Come here, spend a couple hours with us. You get a degree. You get a degree in something.
I see a marketing opportunity here. Why didn't I think of this before?
There is. Okay, Stonehenge is great. Avebury, unreal, right? The Stones of Stennis and the Ring of Brodgar should be in the same conversation. Why not? What's the deal here? Why isn't it recognized? When I look at the Stones of Stennis, I think and the site itself, right? And you look at the site, it is as extraordinary as anything on this planet. But you bring up the Stones of Stennis or the Ring of Brodgar to somebody, they don't know what you're talking about. Why is that?
Tourism.
Yeah.
No, it's actually a good thing. The sites have been left pretty much alone because Auckland's not an easy place to get to. I mean, just to fly there from Edinburgh, it's a $300 flight. I mean, that's only 45 minutes on a propeller plane. So it's not easy to get to, and it's not cheap to get to. But no, Stennis, there's only 3 stones out of 11 that remain. But my God, the first time I went there, I couldn't stop going back again and again and again. It's I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I'll paint you a picture here. The 2 massive monoliths that are still there, they are 19.5 feet high, which, by the way, is a height that's consistent on many of the tall stones in the Scottish Islands and also in Armenia in the Middle East. So someone's borrowing from the same book here. But also, they've been cut at very precise angles as though by a lathe. And one of them is the pyramid angle of 51 degrees. That's not the kind of angle that any builder just picks by accident. I mean, you got to know what you're doing here. Another one's 40 degrees, and 45 degrees, which is a standard angle. But there are unusual angles at the tips of these things. But these rocks are only 8 inches thick. So 19 feet tall, 8 inches thick, and they're literally standing on their center of gravity within, there you go, within a shallow socket that's only about less than a foot deep. So they're literally standing on the center of gravity in a place that is renowned for 55-mile-an-hour winds every day. So it's an incredible achievement for the builders that these things are still standing. But when you go there, it's like you're standing inside this sentient machine. That's the only way I can describe it, because there is nothing like it. And Stennis actually comes from an old Armenian word meaning the place of council, which oddly enough, it was still remembered as such when the Vikings showed up in the historical era. So the big question is, what is Armenian language doing behind these things? In fact, if you go to any of the sites in Orkney, all the sites can be deciphered through Armenian language, one of the oldest languages in the world. And by the way, I should point out the place of origin of a very old people called the Lords of Anu, better known as our friends, the Anunnaki. So there is a huge connection here between these two lands linguistically, if not by genetics as well, because at least 24% of the genetic line of Scotland comes from the Armenian highlands, from Egypt, and also from the Middle East. That was, again, a big shock. I didn't realize that there was that huge genetic connection. And apparently, this migration began around 6000 BC through Europe, which ties in beautifully with the earliest dates that I have for the sites on Orkney. So that's just what a kind of a picture of what's going on here. But it's also the fact that when you're sitting in Stennis, you also got the landscape and the rhythm of the landscape around it. You have two lochs around it. This place is only about 3 feet above sea level, by the way. It's kind of in danger of going under within our lifetime. But if you look over the isthmus, you see the remains of an old stone row. I also discovered a missing quadrangle of stones, which is painted in the 18th century, and it's completely gone. I'm not the only person that's ever talked about this, and I found it in an old map of the area, so that's gone missing too. A lot of these things get taken down and used for building material. The sites are used for quarry during the Victorian era. But the fact is that when you're sitting on this landscape, you can see the connection to the other stone circles on the isthmus of this landscape. So the stones are actually placed very strategically, as though an artist with great sensitivity put them on the landscape to make the temples behave in accordance to the shape of the landscape as well. That's what's mind-blowing. It wasn't just a building. It was the fact that it relates to the landscape and the temples beyond as well. It's a huge engineering feat.
I want to discuss Brodgar in a second. I want to stay on Stennis, if I may, which I totally agree. Stunning to look at. I mean, just stunning. Perfection, right?
And there's just 3 stones that remain, and even so, it's like, I'm speechless talking about this place.
You know, I have discussed Stennis many times on the show in the past, and I've gone back and researched in books and things, and I can't help but look at the sheep, right? And so the sheep are everywhere. No people. Nobody's there, right?
No selfie hunters.
Yeah, right. And you saw the sheep in that shot, which is why I picked that particular one. But let's stay with that for a second. Are we talking about, what does your research show you? Are we looking at something religious? Were there gods involved? Was it that, or was it more technical? Was it astronomical? What are you pointing at just with Stennis?
All of the above, and probably more stuff that we don't know about.
Right.
All we have that remains from the site are the writings of the first Norwegian settlers, and they had already followed on from the Christian settlers who kind of twisted the local stories because they had encountered the same people in Ireland, and they tried to undermine the credibility of this very ancient culture purely for religious reasons. And the one thing that stood out from the people that used to use Stennis and the sites around there were that they looked very different to the local inhabitants. They were lighter skinned, they were much taller, and they wore these distinctive white robes of office. Now, throughout the world, the white robe of office usually depicts a holy or as someone who belongs in the holy office that takes care of a sacred space. But it was still known, Stalinus was still known as a place of council. And it was only during the later years, after the Vikings arrived, when shipping and commerce came into play, that they needed a bigger harbor in order to get the ships from A to B. So they moved the place of council from Stennis to another ancient place of council, where today is the town of Kirkwall, which is the capital of Orkney, essentially. It's a very, very large town, essentially, beautiful town. So it was still remembered as such. And the one thing that they said was these people were called by two names. They were called the Pape and the Petty. And that's all we hear about it. Everything goes blank after that.
Right.
I struggled with this for a while. And I mean, I like looking into the language of things, because language is a great fingerprint of where people have been, what they've done, and what the places do. You just have to remember that back in the day, things were given a name because of their function. So it took a while to make the connection with Armenia, and it came really by huge coincidence. There was someone who lives not far from me who asked me to go and do a little bit of work on their house. And when I was leaving, they said, well, would you like the copy of this book? I got 2 copies of the same book by this Armenian scholar who has shown that the migration of Armenian language through Europe fashioned Gaelic language.
Are you talking about Vahan Setyan?
Yes. And we're good buddies now. I like him.
He's amazing.
I like that guy.
Yeah,
it was his book which helped me actually put the groundwork behind Scotland's sacred sites, because suddenly I can read these names in Armenian and I'm going, my God, they actually mean something. So a pape essentially is a monk or a holy person. Well, of course, they would be dressed in white. They were the caretakers. Now, the petty took a little bit more work, and they still existed in the historical era. In the Egyptian temple, they were the caretakers of the Egyptian temple, and they called them exactly by the same name. And they still existed in Persia only 2,000 years ago, the Peter. And they literally were described as very tall people, very elegant, almost sort of debonair, if you like. And they're very, very tall, very light-skinned. And they're also into looking and mapping the stars on the ground. And suddenly the Pete and the Pape of Scotland, of Orkney and of Stennis, made a lot of sense. And it put the folklore on a grounding level. But again, that opens up another can of worms, because now you've got an Egyptian and an Armenian connection, which of course is underlaid by the genetic blueprint of the people who live in that part of the world.
Now, isn't it as we are going through DNA and migration patterns of the world, everything is pointing back in that direction? This isn't something that is part of culture or folklore. This or claims of Armenian people, whatever. Yeah. This is a genetic pattern through DNA, right?
Absolutely, and migration and climatology are involved as well. So when we look at the central core of the ancient Armenian people, which turns out to be one of the oldest civilizations on the planet, right next to the Aymara. And by the way, both languages are very unusual. Like Aymara is like a design language that a computer can understand. I mean, that's an incredible discovery, and Armenian is not far behind. So what the Armenian scholars were saying is that we have a history of migration because of the need to move to west because the weather was changing. Well, when they moved out of the Armenian highlands, one group went south, and it formed the foundation of the Sumerian culture, which of course all the historians began to bore their eyes out. That's just not possible. Well, they've now discovered that underneath the Sumerian layer of civilization, they found the earlier Armenian layer below that. So now we know where the Sumerians came from. And the Armenian scholars are saying, well, we told you this. We've been trying to tell you this forever. Because the other group went north to what became Scythia and the Scythian culture. They went all the way from Siberia, all the way around the Crimea, southern Ukraine, all the way to the Bulgaria, around the Black Sea. Mm-hmm. And from there, after a few thousand years of staying there, the climate changed around 6000 BC. And oddly enough, it was a problem in Canada, where there was a massive glacial lake that broke its banks, and it set off a tidal wave that went through the Atlantic and set off a chain reaction in the Western Europe. And it forced the people in Eastern Europe to move west and split into two. Now, one group goes south into the Mediterranean,
right,
goes and then goes to Malta, Sardinia, and from there around the back of Portugal into France, Southern Ireland, and North Scotland. Now, the other group were what became the Nordic people, the tall, light-skinned, blonde, blue-eyed people that we call Caucasians. They went north through Denmark, Scandinavia, Norway, and from there they hopped on to Orkney. They bypassed England and the coast, the mainland of Scotland altogether. So they started up there, and then they went down this way.
Yeah,
So
what's interesting is they left a DNA trail. So here's Armenia, right? Yeah. And they split, north and south, Mediterranean, northern Europe, and left a DNA trail the whole way.
Absolutely.
Ended in Spain and Scotland.
And also they left a linguistic trail. That was the other thing. So, for example, Karnak in Brittany, the original name of that area is Armorica, and it's an Armenian name, and it means the land where the sun descends into mother, meaning the ocean. That's what Armorica actually means. And all of those place names around Karnak, they have the equivalent place names in Armenia, just like in Wales. The original name of Wales is Cymru. Well, there is a Cymru today in Armenia itself. It's still a province. So their stories are getting more traction because they're not just making this up because they want to make themselves, feel superior. They're just saying that we have this story. People have given this up for dead because we've been massacred over the centuries. We have all of these stories to tell, and we need to tell the world before it disappears. And I agree with them. I wholeheartedly agree. It's really upending our concept of how migration in history took place, and even more so on the northwest extreme of Europe.
Now, and here's what's interesting. If you and I were cruising around 5,000 years ago and we're visiting this kingdom and this city and we're writing down history, and man, you guys are old. Yeah. Not as old as Armenia, though. Right? And you can trace these comments, if you look hard enough, through all of the ancient cultures. They would comment about the ancient Armenian kings that predated everything.
Exactly. And also the intermarriage between the houses of Armenia, which actually existed in different names, which is what makes it so, fiendishly complicated. There was Mitanni and Urartu and Urarti. All of these were the same people. They just changed names because of, politics. But at one point, there was a lot of intermarriage with the Egyptian royal bloodline, because at one point, the southern border of Armenia was the northern border of Egypt. We forget this.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't just exist in Egypt today. It went around Palestine, through Syria, into what is today southern Turkey. And there's one of the most famous letters that exists is the letter from Nefertiti, who doesn't quite look Egyptian, does she?
No, and see,
the aquiline nose, and you think, hello. Well, you asked the Armenian scholars, and they said, well, wait a minute. We know Nefertiti because the name means she who is the backbone of the pharaoh. It's not a name, it's a title. And there's a letter that she writes to her father saying, Father, the marriage has now taken place. Will you please bring down the dowry from the lands from the north? Well, the only land to the north of Egypt back then, in her time, was the Armenian Highlands.
Armenian Highlands. And there is research right now. Now, we're supposed to be talking about Scotland. We are. Okay. So here's the trippy thing. Is Nefertiti, the search for her tomb, there's research that puts her tomb possibly in the Armenian Highlands, which is modern day Turkey today.
Now, that would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't that be
wonderful? But we know there is a connection to Scotland, and this is now going on to the work of the late Lawrence Gardner. So I'm going to quote him at length, and I hope I do it well. Drawing from very similar sources, he made the point that there was the daughter of the pharaoh Smenkhare. So we're talking the same period around Tutankhamun, Akhenaten. Her daughter married Aniel, the prince of Scythia, who is essentially now an extension of Armenia under a different name. And it was their daughter who then
Oh, we lost you. Okay, let's see if you come back. I don't know if you can hear me. We lost Freddie, everybody. Let me see here. I'm going to pull this back, and and I'm going to see if I can do a reset. And now, what in the second half of Freddie's book, as we're doing this reset, is this migration conversation coming from Armenia? Now, and Armenia today is this big, but back then the Armenian highlands and landlocked, but back then it wasn't, and it was a huge chunk of land that partly modern day Turkey today. So I'm waiting for Freddie to do a reset and come back to us here. He's coming back. Freddie is back with us.
That keeps happening a lot.
Yeah. So what I was telling everybody is that the second half of the book covers this migration, immigration, whatever you want to call it, from Armenia. And today, and I'm going to pull up Brogdar in just a second, and there's a reason why I want to discuss this. But today we know Armenia is this big, and it's landlocked. But 600 years ago, before modern day Turkey, the Armenian highlands wasn't landlocked. It was everything.
Yeah.
And so Göbekli Tepe, that's Armenian.
The original name is Portasar, which depending on how you work the translation, it's the umbilical cord of the mountain, or the pregnant belly mountain, but it also means the umbilical cord of Osiris. Asar is the name of Osiris. Osiris is the Greek transliteration of Asar. And one thing I pointed out in an earlier book is that when you connect the corner of the small pyramid of Giza to the corner of the large pyramid, and you draw the cord right through the two, you end up at Portasar. That's what they meant by calling it the umbilical cord of Osiris. So Portasar and Giza are connected by geodetically and also by astronomy, because when you look at the three stones on the southern section of the enclosure D of Göbekli Tepe, and you're standing in between those two massive pillars, which, by the way, are the same height as the pillars on Stennis.
Now, this is where I'm going. Okay,
exactly. I knew you were thinking that. 19.5 feet tall. How about that? So you're standing in between the two pillars. You've got the three stones at the bottom looking at the beautiful flat landscape and down to Haran. And on the winter solstice of 10,400 BC, you have Orion's belt rising above one pillar. The second pillar marks the midheaven, and the third pillar marks the setting. Now, what's happening on that date at Giza, 800 miles away? On the equinox, we have exactly the same alignment with the Giza pyramids, with Orion. So all of these things are connected. They're part of the same strategy.
Now, if we stop and think about this for a second. Now, we brought up Göbekli Tepe. We've talked about Stennis. We've talked about this migration and the connection through DNA mapping. This is science we are talking about. And you can go to these megalithic sites. They still exist. And then we have Karahunj.
God, I knew you were going to come up with that one.
and there's a reason for this. So when we look at Stonehenge, Karahunj means Stonehenge in Armenian, by the way. Right? That's the direct translation.
Yeah, Kar is stone and Hunj is henge.
Yes. And so when we look at Karahunj, which was 7,000 BC, okay, so we're 4,000 years predating Stonehenge, and we have Stennis and Brogdar. Now, okay, so back to all of this is connected, and when you look at Karahunj, which I'm going to pull up an image for everybody to just check this out, and let me just do something correct.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll fill in the gap. Karahunj, which when you see it from the air, and I hope you got an aerial photograph, it's a stone circle, and it has what the remains of four large avenues, like a shape of a cross. And there we are. And the funny thing is that a lot of the shapes of the stones are exactly the same shapes as the ones in the stone circles of Scotland. That's what's really incredible. But
okay.
Paris Heruni, who was doing the research into the archaeoastronomy of the site, and this is a guy with 53 patents to his name, so he's not exactly lightweight. The dates are actually much older. He said that because there are elliptical holes in some of those stones, and it allows you to look at a particular bead of the sky. And 5 out of the 13 objects which they've mapped at Karahunj are most of the stars of Orion and Orion's belt. But they gave you also a date because of the way the precession works. The stars obviously don't align with the stone circle today. So Paris really stuck his neck out on this because he said the time when all the things aligned at Karahunj in the Armenian highlands is 22,000 BC. And if you look at those stones, they look like they've been there for a long, long time.
And so what Freddie is referring to, there's a hole here, there's a hole here. So you are able to line up the stones and peer through in ancient times and look at a specific star, a planet.
Exactly.
And an alignment. But this was happening 10,000 years ago, at least.
In 2000 BC.
That's right. And this is in Armenia. And then the migration happens. And so when we turn around and we look at Brogdar, which is here, everybody. Now, to think that there's not a connection and not a similarity here, no, there is definitely something going on.
Yeah, you have to actually go there and look and examine and walk all the stones, and you begin to realize that the shapes are similar. I mean, in some cases, they're identical shapes. They're just not rocks they pulled out of the ground. There are specific alignments. There are specific angles to the top of the unusual angles to the top of the megaliths, and they're recurring. And also on the Isle of Lewis, the same thing. In fact, if you want to see the dead ringer or the doppelganger of Karahunj on the Isle of Lewis, it's called Kalanish, and that's a stone circle with the 4 avenues in a much more simplified form version of Karahunj. So Karahunj is essentially the early sister of Kalanish on the Isle of Lewis, which is one of the most well-preserved stone circles in the Scottish Islands. That was what was really important. And also the fact that I've been to Kalanish so many times. The one thing that sticks out is the fact that you had this beautiful view of the intercardinal horizon from the stone circle, except for this one damn outcrop of rock behind the tallest stone, which is 19.5 feet tall. And I wondered if it was done deliberately, because why would you just block this piece of land when you've got a perfect view, 300 degrees around you, except for this little knob of rock? Well, it turns out that there was some archaeologists actually found on that knob of rock the post hole or the carved holes for 2 enormous stones, which would have been even taller than that megalith in the center that you're looking at right there. So the outcrop of rock behind this photograph actually held 2 stones like a portal. So I figured, I wonder if it's trying to look at something. Well, in 3,500 BC, if you're standing here in Kalanish, looking over that outcrop of rock, you see the belt stars of Orion rising over it for the first time on the winter solstice. So now we're seeing the Armenian highlands taking their, in 6,000 BC, they migrated. They went up to Scandinavia. They went round to Orkney, built the sites there in 5,300. And then within 1,000 years, they've moved down into the what used to be this massive mini continent before the sea level rose on the Isle of Lewis. And they built another megalithic culture there. So they're slowly working their way around Britain. I guess they didn't like the people there or something. There was still a lot of ice left over from the Ice Age, so it probably was not the best place to live in. So they kept slowly moving around the coast, slowly making their way down to Ireland to meet the other group of Armenians who'd been going through the Mediterranean, through Sardinia, Portugal, and France. And they were the tall people with red hair and green eyes.
Let's take our break. Hold on. Too much to get in, Freddie, in one segment. Let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, Freddie Silva. This is extraordinary. And when you think about this, it's the same mindset. It's the same technology. Started in Armenia, ended up in Scotland. British Isles. It's incredible. I am your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. More with Freddie after this.
You're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the X.
Hey, what up, y'all? It's your girl Vivica Fox here, and you are listening to my boy, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will.
This is Billy Carson, founder and CEO of ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. ForbiddenKnowledge.tv is the fastest growing and one of the most watched networks in the world. And I would like to personally invite you to check out our expanding library of TV, film, lectures, and special presentations. ForbiddenKnowledge.tv has over 6,000 videos covering lost history, health, UFOs, spirituality, and our future. We are committed to our community, and with my personal invitation, you can right now get your own free 30-day membership at ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. Your own library of information starts today at ForbiddenKnowledge.tv.
Your 1 million gigawatt paranormal powerhouse, KUNX-DB, the X.
Are you ready to read about true paranormal events? UNX Media publishes nonfiction books about UFOs, ghosts and haunted places, time anomalies, cryptid creatures, and more. Just like KUNX-DB Radio, it's all about unexplained phenomena. Visit www.unxmedia.com to see our list of great book titles by Debbie Ziegelmeyer, Gene Walker, Devin Listrom, Wayne Lawrence, Bill Spicer, and yours truly, Margie Kay. That's unxmedia.com.
When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roast it to the dark side of Fade to Black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Yes, Rivermoon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Brittany, Gabby, and you're listening to JChurchRadio.com.
It's not a lifestyle we chose. We were born this way.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Welcome back. Freddie Silva is here. An incredible conversation happening. And I'm going to just jump straight back into it. And I want to get into my mind as I was reading the book. And you probably don't remember something that you wrote, but it stuck with me.
God, I hope I do.
And well, I got you sent me the book when it first came out, and I read it, and I've reread it, and I'm on my third pass through, and I there's this line. Okay, so please take this the wrong way. Freddie's information in the book is coming at you from all directions, and he's making these connections with not only stones and representation, but languages and other things that are discussed. And you can't help but think, Freddie, you're going, okay, Freddie's imagination is gone away with him, and he's making these connections with words and Armenian and Egyptian and different sites, and it's over and over in the book. But then, right as your mind gets overtaken with this thought that this is just too crazy, Freddie, you did a line in the book. You said, "Okay, let's start over." Right? You go, let's start afresh, and you go, I'm getting this information from the historical record. And these are the references. I'm going to Irish historians. I'm going to Scottish historians. From I'm going to be wrong here. 6th century. And that's, you are doing the hard research to connect this, where these references in the historical record from Ireland and from Scotland directly says, man, this came from the Mediterranean.
Exactly. And in fact, the Treaty of Dumbarton, which essentially sets out Scottish independence, actually claims that the Scottish actually came from Scythia. It's right there in the treaty in the 14th century.
Now, stop right there. What is Scythia? You need to explain.
So Scythia is essentially when the Armenian highlands, the Armenian people went through various mutations in terms of names, but essentially it's a variation on a theme. Well, when you branch north of the Armenian highlands, you go through Mount Ararat into what is now Ukraine, that whole area becomes known as Scythia. It's hard to figure out when, 6,000, 5,000, 4,000 BC, not quite sure when because all the records are missing, but it becomes one of the biggest civilizations in that part of the world, certainly around 4,000, 3,000 BC, and it extended all the way to Mongolia. It extended all the way across the Russian steppes, all the way through to Bulgaria, so it wraps around the Caspian and Black Seas and touches the north of what is today Greece. So it's a huge culture, a huge civilization. Excuse me. And it was very influential throughout the Near East and the Mediterranean, at some points even outflanking, in fact, surpassing the Greek culture that came after it. So huge influence, and a lot of the princes of Scythia would also be marrying the daughters of the pharaohs in Egypt. So there was a huge historical tract that we're not aware of, or at least it's kept in the background for now.
Now, and so staying with this, if it is indeed a part of the historical record, then 6th century, there you have the arrival of the Vikings. The Romans show up, right? Year 0, whatever. Let's just. I'm pulling round numbers out, but you have the arrival of the Norwegians and the Vikings, and certainly the Romans are there. But we have a gap of about 3,000 years, right? And so, what with the arrival? Were there remnants of these civilizations then? Is that what greeted, the Vikings and certainly the Romans coming in too and trying to make their way through? What was left? Because it's a 3,000-year gap, and you have to get that information about who built these sites and who came before them.
Yeah. No, what happened was that in the climate changed severely in 2500 BC. There was a huge civilization living on the Hebrides, which is the western Isles of Scotland, and also in Orkney to the north. And the change of weather forced everybody onto the Scottish mainland. That's where we start getting the oldest sites and habitations on the west coast of Scotland. After that, the weather got worse and worse, it's progressively worse. And now we're heading into around 500 BC. And now we're starting to get people coming up from Ireland and also from mainland Europe, and also the Vikings. But by this point, there's so much information that's being lost because everybody's being butchered left, right, and center.
Right.
Also, because of the depopulation, so much of the record is buried. We just haven't found it. Ironically, most of the information survives in Ireland. They were great in terms of keeping up the information that goes back into prehistory. I mean, there are certain folklores that talk about the flood, which is incredible. And in fact, some of the first people that moved to islands, the way that they're describing the physiological substance of the of Ireland at the time suggests a time when the entire country was overwhelmed by a terrible catastrophe. So this is a very old record. But what happened was when the Catholic Church shows up, and this now is a big story, so I'm going to try and condense it. The church was very much trying to overrun the old divine bloodline in Europe. And it was pretty much maintained during their time by the Merovingian line in Central Europe. Now, they did away with those people. They put the Carolingians on the throne. So they figured that by the time to get to Ireland, the concept of a divine bloodline is gone. It no longer exists, and the Catholic Church is top dog. Well, imagine their surprise when they show up in Ireland and people are honoring these beautiful, very tall, light-skinned, blonde, blue-eyed people called the Tuatha de Danann, who are essentially the Tuatha de Danu, the royal bloodline of Scythia, who were originally the Anunnaki of people of Anu of Armenia. There's your connection. So because they couldn't have this, they got the monks to rewrite all the folklore and the old written history of Ireland to the point where, and I actually wrote about this in the book, if you read the story of Ireland today from all different angles, none of it makes any sense. And that's the whole point, because they'd altered the story and the timeline so much to give the people that came to give Patrick, St. Patrick and his lineage, the tall position within the Irish pantheon and make them saints. And then that in turn makes the Irish people fall in love with the Catholic Church. But they knew much better, because they kept this other secondary profile, which is the bardic traditions. Now, the bards, no one ever paid much attention to them, because they would go to pubs and they would sing these happy songs without the church ever realizing that they actually maintained the oral tradition of what was going on since the Great Flood, and every single culture that migrated from the Mediterranean that landed in Ireland and formed the foundation of these divine bloodlines. They didn't see that one coming. So that's how I approached it from the bardic tradition, glued together the parts that made sense in the rewritten traditions of Ireland. And now there's a semblance of that made sense, because now you go to the archaeological trail. Yes, you can match the dates through archaeology. You can match the migration through DNA, which is all brand new information. And language, the fingerprint of the Armenian culture via France through Ireland is all there. So when you've got all of those four things stacked up, now you're on much shorter ground. That was the hard part of this research. You're working with breadcrumbs, but the things that keep them together is migration and climate, which can be validated, DNA, which is definitely validated, and the language is also validated as well. And in fact, there's one grave in the Holy Island in Rathlin, which is halfway between Ireland and Scotland, which actually has the graves of people whose DNA originated in Sardinia with the blueprint of Armenian Highlands in their DNA.
So if you go to you live in Ireland, you live in Scotland, you live in Wales, right? And you go to whatever Ancestry 123, and you do a DNA, and your mom comes home. Hey, did you get your DNA? I did. So what's going on? I'm half Armenian, right? This is what is going on, and I find that so fascinating. Now, we just I want to bring up Brodgar one more time. This is on Orkney Island, next to Stennis, right?
Yeah.
What is going on here? The similarities. I'm going to bring my mouse over here. The similarities between Carahunge and other henges, right, is there. This is ancient. This is really, really old. Now, is this the mind of the Armenian highlands imported into Orkney Island?
It's possible. This is where it becomes a hypothesis because you can't totally prove it. My point is that there's a fingerprint that's founded by language. So, for example, the place names mean something. They're not. For example, Brodgar is not named after a town or a farm or whatever. That's what you find when you go to Wikipedia. No, the place was named for a function. So, if you just take Brodgar and take the let's say take the G off. Take the D off because the original name is Brodgar. Now, if you go through the Armenian translation of Brodgar, you come up with, I'm going to read this because it's late at night, Barakar. So it's not how it's written, it's how it's pronounced, Barakar.
Mm-hmm.
So Brodgar, Barakar. So when you move from culture to culture, your word changes slightly. So you've got to hear it, okay? So Barakar means the dance song stones. That might not mean anything to anybody, except there's one great folklore that survives in association to this particular stone circle. And it talks about how it was a place where the giants used to dance. And one day a fiddler strikes up a very lusty tune and the giants start dancing and dancing. The problem is they were dancing well past dawn when they should have gone back home. So because they forgot about this and they kept on dancing, when the sun came up, they were all turned to stone. And that's why Brodgar in Armenian means dance, song, stones. So it matches the folklore of why the place is named after this. But there's something even more interesting. I mentioned before that there's an overlap between Egyptian and Armenian culture. Well, if you go into Egyptian language, they actually call it Braga. It's actually a word, Braga, which is not dissimilar to Brodgar. And it means the abode or shrine of the sun god. And the whole stone circle does map out all the stations of the sun and its interaction with the moon. So again, the title of the place name is telling you what it does. That's what's so wonderful about language. In the old days, they gave it a description of its very function.
When I look at this, something tells me it's religious. There's something symbolic going on here. But there has to be alignments going on as well. And what I talked about the brain earlier in the show, you know, how powerful our brain is. Our brain today was the same as it was 20,000 years ago. It's the same.
Good God. I'm really old, Jimmy.
Yeah, right. and so there is something going on here. And now, do you feel that this was a high technology civilization that built this, or were these hunter-gatherers, which is what an anthropologist is going to tell you, that we're not giving enough credit to Stone Age man?
No, the folklore is very clear on this, that there was a population living on Orkney at the time, and then there were these two groups of individuals that behaved very much like a ministerial college, and they were master seafarers and astronomers. And they kept themselves to themselves away from the main population. So there's a parallel civilization running side by side with the hunter-gatherers on Orkney. And the funny thing is, at the center of the position of Brodgar itself, if an architect would go there, he'd say, well, it's funny that it's actually not on the high point of this ridge where, you know, a prominent viewing platform would have made itself presented to the builders of the stone circle, but they chose a lesser site as though it was very, very important for the positioning of the stone circle. Well, like I mentioned before, the fact that you can overlay the three Egyptian pyramids over the three circles perfectly with the summits exactly for the center is one giveaway. But the second giveaway is that the center of the ring of Brodgar marks exactly, and I mean exactly, the 49th parallel. So someone was measuring something that was commensurate with the planet. And I'm not the first person that has come up with this theory, because I believe it was, what is their name? They wrote a wonderful book about this called Uriel's Machine. Two of my favorite researchers and authors. I'm going to Knight and Lomas. Thank you very much. And they actually brought this up as well. I don't totally agree with their theory, but I think they open up some very interesting points for conversation. And they also describe Brodgar in terms of a machine. The fact that all the stones are calculating the divisions of the sky by people who were already quite comfortable with the idea of mapping the sky and the thousands of years that it takes for the objects to move around. So it's a technology based on their terms. I wouldn't call it a computer technology or an alien technology. I think they were working with something that was very natural to them, which was the combination of stone, landscape, and the sky, and bringing those three things together to work for the human race and also for them.
This is where it gets a little crazy for me. And what I don't like is when skeptics come in and the only basis of their argument is no.
Well, it's good because it means that you're getting under their skin, isn't it? I mean, anybody that tries to upend the model of academia and its narrow little box of thinking, and it comes in useful as well. I mean, we can't just throw everything out with the bathwater. They, until one of their own people from their own little club, and it is a kind of a club, until one of their own people comes up with this stuff and writes a paper and everybody agrees that it works, then they'll believe it and they'll congratulate themselves. For example, we already knew 30 years ago that the original site for Stonehenge was dated to 8,000 BC. The 56 holes that go around Stonehenge, which once had the original blue stones, we knew that they were 8,000 BC. Well, it took them 30 years to actually go there, take our information, get a prod, get some carbon-14, and they'd go, oh, yes, it's 8,000 BC is the original date of the site. Well, yes. So they don't want to hear it from us. It has to come from them. It sets everything back for so much. But the independent people who are doing all this research are so much further ahead because they're not confined by a box.
Right.
I have to go to my academic establishment and say, can I have permission to quote this person that you don't like? Despite the fact that the research tracks very nicely. I mean, either it does or it doesn't. It's it's a black and white case. And if it doesn't track, then we throw it away. But if it tracks, why not use it as a basis for expanding what we know? I mean, by their thinking, we shouldn't have evolved beyond candles. And here we are with light bulbs. It's that kind of medieval thinking sometimes which holds everything back. And it's kind of unfortunate because, people, independent researchers are doing incredible stuff out there. And then years later,
we have
technology.
We have flashlights. And here's the thing, to your point, now I want to address this. Robert Schoch in 1992, when he presented his research along with John Anthony West in San Diego to the professional geologists and their association that gets together every year, and he said, hey, the Sphinx might be dating back to 10,000 BC. It's 12,000 years old. And they said, no. And they said, this was their response. Everything happened at 2500 BC. Mesopotamia and Giza at its oldest is 3000 BC. There's nothing on this planet older than 3000 BC. Show us anything and we can have a discussion. 3 years later, what happens?
Exactly.
Göbekli Tepe. And
now
so
we have a problem, Houston.
We have a problem,
and now we have a bigger problem called Karahunj, 22,000 BC.
Exactly right. And and now we have what? We have 11 Göbekli Tepes now, right? There's like a 12 Tepe, and we knew that this was going to happen. If there's one, there's going to be more. But my point is, it hasn't been enough for everybody to step up and say everything is much older. There was civilizations that predated not only Mesopotamia and Giza, but extend back now 7, 8, 9, 10,000 years and older. Yeah. But they haven't given in. They asked for it, Freddie, and we gave it to them.
All you have to do is listen to the people that were here before us. I mean, the more I travel around the world, the more I appreciate the fact that Europeans are actually the Johnny-come-lately. We're not the high point of civilization. We're the last point of civilization. all this stuff. If you go to the Pacific and listen to what the islanders are saying and look at the Pacific as a whole and go, there's a lot of land that should be there but isn't there anymore. And they'll say, oh, yeah, I mean, the islands are the tops of the mountains where our land used to be because the sea level rose or the land sank or both. And if you hear their stories, and I heard a lot of their stories, they all overlap, and they keep talking about a parallel civilization that we lived alongside before a global flood. Everybody says this. So I don't know why it's so difficult for these people to understand it. If they can't all be making this stuff up, if they're all saying exactly the same thing. And they're also saying they're not aliens, they're human-like. This is the one that my favorite phrase, human-like but not quite human. So they're kind of like us because we're comfortable with them. You know, we weren't scared of them. We didn't worship them. We honored them because they knew something we didn't, and they gave us the accoutrements of civilization. So we blessed them for telling us how to grow crops or domesticate cattle or do all the wonderful things we have today. And they still have a great, sort of tradition of honoring these people, without whom they'd still be, scavenging for mollusks or snails, which I actually kind of like snails myself, but, I won't really go there. So, yeah, if you just listen to what these people are saying and take a step back and stop thinking that we are the high point of everything, everything falls into place beautifully. And you also respect the cultures from whom we've learned so much.
Everything is taught.
Yeah.
Right? Everything is taught.
And remembered.
And remember, that's it. That there is nothing else to consider here. So when you look at Stennis, and you look at Brodgar and other stone circles, and then you look at Göbekli Tepe, and you look at Karahoonj, the art of quarrying and how to get these stones cut and moved and placed, and the style of that is all taught. This is all taught. This was brought in from other cultures. There isn't another way to look at it. And if we start there, that means somebody taught whoever built Göbekli Tepe at 10,000 BC, somebody taught them how to do it. So there is something older out there that is yet to be discovered. There is
exactly.
a way to look at it, is there, Freddie?
No, and I mean, and if you go to Lake Titicaca and you look very carefully around some of the towns on the periphery of Lake Titicaca, because it is shrinking as the years go by, you'll see the exact same T-shaped pillars that you find in Göbekli Tepe, hidden here and there. Essentially, all this stuff was looted by ironically, by a lot of the English barons that moved in to build the railroads in Bolivia and used these stones for ballast for the railroads. It's criminal. And a lot of the local villagers also helped themselves, guided by the church, of course, to take down these symbols of the devil, they called it. But yes, I mean, and also the fact that you have the same understanding, the same methodology. It's as though they're borrowing from the same manual everywhere you go. I mean, let's take the T-shape of the Göbekli Tepe pillar. That T-shape actually means something in most cultures. It's the Tao. It means the breath of God. And it still existed there in Central America and in Japan. So whenever you see that T-shape, right down to that shape that you also find at the main kiva in Chaco Canyon in Hopi Land, the breath of God, you go through the breath of God to receive the knowledge of a creative source, which is all the knowledge that we need to get by in daily life. Simple things like stargazing or mathematics or how to work with make water clean and so forth. These things come from the same manual. It's a learner's experience, and all the wisdom keepers of any tribe, they take up to 10 years to learn this information so that the Chinese whispers don't work their way into the story. I remember my first trip to New Zealand 12 years ago, I think it was. I met a new lady who became the wisdom keeper of the Maori. You know, big tattoos, very fearsome looking. I would not pick a fight with her. Once you get to know her, she's a pussycat. She's a lovely woman. And she said, it's kind of a bittersweet thing for me because, I'm only 22. I want to go disco dancing and do some drugs and get to do what young people do. And I've been given this honor to become the wisdom keeper of the entire Maori culture. So I have to learn everything by heart and not miss a beat so I don't make things up and distort the story, it's going to take me between 5 to 10 years to do this. And she's living in a sort of a round structure with a dirt floor, no television, no electricity, and that's her life, and she accepts it. So she's doing what the Druids used to do in Scotland and Ireland, learning the mysteries, learning the method, because you don't want that information to, suddenly you get it wrong, and that creates a whole series of problems down the line. And then we inherit that information and we don't know where we are. So it's very important to learn this folklore, to listen to what they were saying, because once you dig deep enough and you don't have the academic constraints, it gets you to do all kinds of interesting things.
Let's take a break right here. And when we come back, Freddie, I want to talk purses.
Purses? Oh, you shouldn't have. Oh, dear.
We'll do all of that when we come back. Our guest tonight is Freddie Silva. This is Fade to Black. What a great conversation. It's perfect. Are you taking notes? Next, we're talking bags. And you fade or not, you know exactly where I'm going. He's got chapters in the book dedicated to this. We're going to do all of that in just a short minute after this break. Stay with us.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Your 1 million gigawatt paranormal powerhouse, KUNX-DB, VX.
2022 MUFON Symposium is in Denver, Colorado, July 7th through 10th, and it's on. If you can't make it to Denver, get the live stream. You can watch it live and anytime later. This year's theme is UFOs in the Spotlight. Our speaker lineup is incredible. Join Cheryl Jones, Peter Robbins, Michael Schratt, Kathleen Martin, Tom Reed, Paul Hynek, Peter Davenport, Dave Scott, Craig Campobasso, Donald Schmidt, Mark D'Antonio, and me, Ron James, for an exciting inside look at my new film. Newsflash, Congressman Tim Burchett has just confirmed that he will be making an exclusive live presentation at MUFON 2022. Tim is the most outspoken member of Congress on the UAP topic. You do not want to miss what he has to say. Sign up for our live stream. Get all 3 days of the MUFON Symposium, a 1-year subscription to MUFON TV, and an awesome free gift. What's the free gift? Find out at MUFONsymposium.com/Jimmy. That's MUFONsymposium.com/Jimmy. You do not want to miss a thing.
This is Billy Carson, founder and CEO of ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. ForbiddenKnowledge.tv is the fastest growing and one of the most watched networks in the world. And I would like to personally invite you to check out our expanding library of TV, film, lectures, and special presentations. ForbiddenKnowledge.tv has over 6,000 videos covering lost history, health, UFOs, spirituality, and our future. We are committed to our community, and with my personal invitation, you can right now get your own free 30-day membership at ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. Your own library of information starts today at ForbiddenKnowledge.tv.
Because you never got that pony you always wanted. Damn it. Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network.
Listen, I know, and you know, that you've always wanted your first crystal skull. Or maybe you're a collector just like me, but you just don't know where to go to find the real thing. Then I met Carolyn Ford over at EinsteinTheCrystalSkull.com. Carolyn is the guardian of Einstein, one of the most respected ancient crystal skulls in the world. All of her unique skulls have been imprinted sitting with Einstein in his sacred lodge and are carved from the finest gemstone and materials. Imprinting is the process of receiving the ancient wisdom from the master skull or master computer, Einstein, the ancient crystal skull. To see Carolyn's current collection of crystal skulls, just visit her store at EinsteinTheCrystalSkull.com or click on the banner over on our site. Don't forget to use the promo code Jimmy at checkout to receive 10% off of your order today. That's promo code Jimmy. Finding your first or next crystal skull is easy. Just visit EinsteinTheCrystalSkull.com.
Hello, I'm Katie, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here, repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. And this is Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. Yes. We're of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. And I'm Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. And you're listening to Jimmy Church. The Revolution.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you can become an official Fadernaut by just going to our membership section at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Hello, this is Serena Wright Taylor from Conscious Life Expo, and you're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church, who holds the Lucky Pony record for the best astrological chart since 1963. True story.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. Yeah, our audio got screwed up there. That was pretty interesting. Got a repeat. I'll have to fix that for tomorrow. Don't you worry. Our guest tonight, Freddie Silva. Now, here is the deal, everybody. Freddie will never disappoint, and I promise you.
Oh, the pressure!
Yeah, when you read the book now, you're going to read it in Freddie's voice, and that's my gift to the world. But here's the deal. So I can't remember if we talked about this, but my point is this. So I'm reading the book, and I feel it coming, and I went, okay, here we. Oh, Freddie's going to go. He's going to go bags here, right? Bags are coming. And so this is what we're going to talk about, because this connection, it might be crazier than everything else that we've talked about tonight. And if we think about it in these terms, because the bags, the purses have been discussed hundreds of times on Fade to Black over the last 10 years, Freddie. And I've talked about it with you. And once this was revealed at Göbekli Tepe, it's just like, okay, come on. Somebody's got to start connecting these dots, which are right there in front of us.
Yeah.
Now, this is crazy to me. In Ireland, it was documented. I'm just going to say it. Men of the bag.
Yeah.
Men of the bag. And I'm like, okay, Freddie's going there. And you did. So I'm going to pull up an image really quick for everybody. Everybody knows what we're talking about. But there she blows, right?
Oh, so you. Yeah, it's an extraordinary story. In fact, I picked up on that story when I was in New Zealand, of all places, because they have exactly what we're talking about there. But related to Ireland, here's how the story goes. So we have several migrations to the Mediterranean. And that one of them was led by a guy called Nemed in the second migration. And they had the unfortunate moment of being in Ireland at the same time as a group of very unpleasant giant people covered with red hair called the Fomorians, who were also up in Scotland as well. They appeared to have survived a global flood, and they lived in Ireland. And they were not particularly nice people. They liked eating people for a living, and they traded children. So we're dealing with very nasty unpleasantness. So Nemed and his group of people, many of whom were astronomers and great seafarers, they figured, okay, we've had enough of these battling with the Fomorians. Let's go back to where we came from and sit there for 11 generations. So they went back to Denmark, okay, and they hang out there for 11 centuries, performing, apparently, according to the tradition, or working on magic and all kinds of things. And next time you hear about Nemed and his progeny, they came back to Ireland, now under a different name. They were called the Firbog, which literally means the men of the bag. And I'm thinking, this doesn't make any sense. Why were they carrying back? Oh, of course, because they were practicing magic while they were in Denmark. And the man of the bag is literally a title of office for the wisdom keepers, because I suddenly realized the story that went all the way back to New Zealand, where another group of people you've never heard of called the Waitaha, who were in Easter Island before the flood appeared, to the point where they describe Easter Island as an archipelago, not as an island, as an archipelago. And they talk about how back in the time when they were interacting with the gods, who are described exactly in the same way as the gods of the Middle East and the Armenian highlands, they used to come to Easter Island and they used to give the wisdom to the wisdom keepers of the Waitaha, and the wisdom will be placed in 3 kete, and the kete are called the bags of knowledge. So when you go to Sumeria, which is an extension of the Armenian islands tradition, you see those wisdom keepers holding the bag. Whoever holds that bag, okay, is in possession of the laws of physics, of astronomy, of nature, mathematics, everything that makes a civilization tick. And that's essentially what the men of the bag were all about. So if you see anybody holding that symbol, that is a person that's been indoctrinated into the mysteries of civilization. So this story still exists in Easter Island, in the South Island of New Zealand to this very day, to make the connection to Ireland and Scotland. So you see how far you have to go in research suddenly to find the missing holes in these stories. But what's beautiful is all of these things lined up. They describe the gods exactly the same way in the Pacific as they were in the Middle East, as they were in Europe, and as they were eventually in Scotland and Ireland.
Has there been something in artwork or maybe in carving in the United Kingdom, Scotland and Wales or Ireland that shows a purse?
Not that I'm aware of. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I've never come across it yet. But now that you mention it, I think I'm going to make a mental note when next time in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, which will probably be October, and I'll have a rummage.
Now, continuing on with this, so we've discussed so much, 5,000, 6,000 years ago, 3,000, 2,500 BC, but the culture continued and spread down through north and south from the top to the bottom, where different megalithic structures were built. Same migration.
There's a migration from Ireland, came from the Mediterranean. So now we're talking about the people of Armenia. They move to Scythia. They move around the Mediterranean through Malta, which also has a very unusual footprint. They eventually end up in Sardinia. And to this very day, the same sort of elongated heads that are found throughout the Armenian highlands are also found in a disproportionate amount of the Sardinian people with the same DNA to boot. So we're following the trail of DNA from the Mediterranean, which matches the footprint of folklore and mythology. So from there, these red-headed, light-skinned, green-eyed people start moving around the coast to form one of the oldest cities in Europe, which is Braga in Portugal, which is an Armenian word, by the way. And they eventually move up the coast. The Basque people are also an outpost of the Armenian culture. In fact, most of the Basque language, as Vahan Setian, the renowned academic of Armenia, who's now a good friend of mine, has written a wonderful book on. Very hard to get that book. And then eventually they go up to Carnac and Brittany and France. They're making their way along the coast. They extended the civilization that was already there, the megalithic civilization. And then they moved on to Wales. They're still not getting to England. They're bypassing the whole of England. They go straight to Wales. They form the country called Cymru, which is what the original name of Wales is. And that name is still the same province in Armenia to this very day. And from there, they eventually end up in islands around Knocknerea, and also the area around Donegal, which also comes from an Armenian word called Domegan. It means the place of the sacred council. And that's where we get the arrival of the Tuatha de Danann, who are essentially the bloodline of the Scythian people called the Tuatha de Danu, who eventually would go back to Armenia as the lords of Anu, who are the Anunnaki. So you see how over 6,000 years, this divine lineage moves over to the west coast of islands, escaping persecution, warfare, and also moving along with the climatic changes that were making life in Europe quite difficult for a lot of people. So we have this explosion of civilization on the west coast of Ireland around this incredible mountain, which this very day looks like a big pregnant belly with a little sort of nipple on top called Maeve's Tomb. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah, can we talk about that for a second? That is an extraordinary sight.
Oh, yes. And a lot of the people associated with the Tuatha de Danann are all buried there. In fact, the area around Knocknerea, which is actually, if you're a visiting Egyptian, it means the place before Ra. That's what Knocknerea actually means. And it forms the biggest cemetery and also the biggest collection of megalithic sites in the whole of Ireland. And as far as anybody can tell, some of those sites are dating back to 6,000 BC, which is about the time when, if you look at the original stories of the mythology of Ireland, when the original inhabitants moved there and settled.
It's so breathtaking to look at and so well preserved. I mean, it's an incredible sight. And then when I saw you break down the name, and well, you did your Freddie Silva. Well, okay, here it is. This is Irish, this is Egyptian, and this is Armenian.
Yeah, and again, and these things begin to track over time because it's not just a name, it's actually describing what you're looking at. That's what really brings it home. So you can actually say, well, it sounds like this and it means this. But now that you're actually reading the word in its original language and looking at the site and going, well, yes, it's describing exactly what I'm looking at, that's really hard to make up.
Well, is that how you, I've got another thing I want to jump into really quick, but get me in the mind of Freddie Silva. Is that where you go first? Are you going with the pronunciation? You're not looking at the rocks. You're not looking at do you immediately go to language and the words?
No, I look at it from a multidisciplinary point of view. I follow the easiest path that the stream should take, the obvious, and then start working backwards, taking myself out of the equation. And this is what I like doing. And it's really hard to remove your ego and your thing from the equation. It's not about you. It's about what you're looking at. Mm-hmm. And you take what's certain about the location and you go, okay, there's holes in the story. Now, what can I do with this? Perhaps it was looking at something in the sky. Well, what was it looking at? Let's look at the folklore. Well, the folklore associates the people that were here with a certain star system or a certain constellation. Okay, now we can date it. Well, if we're dating this, then what is the original name that they used to call this before they called it what it is now? Oh, there's another name behind it. Well, that's an unusual name. What does it mean in Old Irish or Old Gaelic? Well, it means this. Well, how did it get there? Well, now we have the people in Armenia saying, well, 55% of Old Germanic, English, and Gaelic comes from a basis in Armenian language. Well, let's track that backwards. Let's see what it would mean to a visiting Armenian. And when you take the words apart and break them into their constituent parts, they tell you exactly what you're looking at. So basically, you're using a multidisciplinary point of view to reach a certain conclusion. Now, is it correct? I don't know. It's only a hypothesis because tomorrow we might find some new information that will completely undermine what I've written. But so far, it makes a lot of logical sense. So as long as that stays, I'll keep sort of pushing forward with that. But I have to say, the more I get involved with etymology and the origin and the root languages, the easier the path seems to be for me to work rather from A to B. I'm now working from B to A. And it's starting to make a lot more sense and also making life a lot easier. For example, if we talk about another great site, which is Kalanish, It has three names. One of them is Tuatha, and not many people actually know about that. It's the old Gaelic name, and I'm going to read this out because I have to pronounce.
I was gonna pull it up too. It's such a great part of the book.
So Tuatha, the original Armenian is Tuatha. That's not very different from the Gaelic, and it means the doorway to the stone seat or throne. Well, when you go to Kananish, that's exactly what it looks like. It's a stone throne made with standing stones that looks like it's standing on a promontory. So again, the name is telling you exactly what it means and what its function is. And it was, again, a place of council.
Page 238 of the book. I tried to get it up on the screen.
I beat you to it.
It's one of my favorites. I looked at this, the map and the breakdown of that so many times. Now, here's what's nuts. Everything that we have been talking about tonight, and certainly the last 15 minutes, relates to aliens in a weird way. But follow my mind for a second, okay?
This could be dangerous, folks.
Today, this UFO conversation that is evolving. Suddenly, we're hearing less talk about ET and aliens coming here, that possibly it's a civilization that's been here living and is still here for a very, very, very long time. And it's just now showing itself. And is this what may be this parallel situation that we've been talking about, not only tonight, but all along, where this knowledge has been shared? It's been talked about. It's come from the gods. It's been handed down.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be because today it seems that ET, instead of us trying to prove the existence of aliens or ET or a phenomenon, we know that the phenomenon is real. Now it's back on the government and the Pentagon to prove what it is.
Yeah.
Right. And this conversation seems to be leaning towards they are here and they always have been. So is this going to answer a lot of questions? Who built the pyramids? Well, I guess we're about to find out.
Well, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I mean, when I was researching the missing lands, it was really looking at the folklore and the inherited knowledge of indigenous people to tell us the story from their point of view and then build upon that. And the one thing that was very obvious is that there was a parallel civilization that they're all perfectly comfortable with, of humanoids that look like us but not quite like us. That was their phrasing. And they were already a few steps ahead. And and this is where it gets lost in time, because we don't know how long this has been going on, because these people didn't keep track of time like we do. They said a long time before that there was a direct association between Orion and people that came from there that looked just like us, just very different. But they're also much more developed than hunter-gatherers, and we live a parallel culture. Now, that would make a lot more sense, and I'm comfortable with that, because they said that at some point after the Great Flood, so now 11,000 years ago, these off-world people moved back to where they came from, but they also left a divine bloodline, which then becomes a half-human, half-divine bloodline, because they intermarried the humans. But the fact is that all of these people that were privy to the information they were given because they were rubbing shoulders with another parallel culture, maybe from somewhere off planet, we inherited that information, and they became the wisdom keepers and the architects and the astronomers that we adore, that built these places that we're talking about. Now, that's a very comfortable place to be in, because there is a sense of someone else who knew something about the building of these structures that was given to a parallel civilization of human beings who was a parallel civilization to the hunter-gatherers. And it's always been that way throughout the last 6,000 years.
And what is so wrong with that?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. In fact, it makes the whole of the human story so much more interesting, doesn't it? The fact that our predecessors were comfortable with difference, with people who were different to us. They embraced them. They embraced the difference. And they were, they said, well, thank you. Without them, today, we wouldn't be alive. We wouldn't achieve what we've achieved today. And that's the crux of the matter. And I think it comes down to both religion and this superiority of European academic thinking. That's the only way I can put my finger on this, that there's an arrogance. And slowly it's the independent researchers that are breaking this arrogance down to put the focus back on the ancient civilizations. And now we've had this conversation of which we're very comfortable with, because it does begin to make a lot of sense.
Well, it would certainly answer a lot of questions. I mean, there's too many holes in history.
Absolutely.
And I've always felt that, I think most of us, that something is being suppressed for a reason. And maybe it's because that academia and different governments don't have the answers. But if this is revealed, what would be where they talk about, and we go back to different reports and studies over the years, the RAND Corporation, that the existence of ET visiting us would be the downfall of civilization, right? Anarchy in the streets, religions, and the stock market, and chaos ensues.
Fear.
Yeah, maybe. But if we reveal, if it is revealed to the planet that there is a civilization that's been living here the whole time, and we weren't aware of it, but here they are, I think that might freak some people out.
Well, I think if you come from a very fundamental religious aspect, I think it would, because you've had this very concrete idea that you're right, and in their minds they are, but we're right too. That's okay. You should be able to have room for, for both points of view. In fact, there's, if I want to just get into channeling for a little bit, I was part of a group who works in England that does some very unusual things. And the lady that runs this group, she's very gifted. It runs in her family, this gift. And she even helps the police with their inquiries. And they're always knocking on her door to solve all kinds of problems. And I've seen her at work. She's incredibly gifted. And one of the things that came through when we're in session together, and I'm part of this group, was that the source was telling us that these advanced people, that we call them, they've appeared, and I'm going to quote now, we have appeared in your historical time frame at times when humans needed that extra push forward because you're up against some very difficult climatic and political changes. So we have manifested appropriate physical bodies to walk among you. We were the seers and the thinkers. We were the very tall people with unusual looking heads. And I wrote all this down 25 years ago, not knowing what the hell this was about. And years later, when after 7 books, I realized, well, actually, you can track this in Egypt. There was a great building period around 2500 BC, part of it which included refurbishing the pyramids, because there is now data to prove that the pyramids were refurbished exactly on that date. And this is where you get the involvement of some very unusual tall people with red hair, which are unusual large skulls. And they found the bones buried throughout Egypt. I think Imhotep was one of them, if I'm not mistaken. So these people do suddenly appear throughout our history, and they kind of help us move forward, and then they go back into the shadows. And one of the things that I found very interesting was that, well, why did you develop these unusual bodies? And they said, well, because we no longer have a physical form. We used to be, the very tall people in your civilization tens of thousands of years ago, but our time came and went. We're now no longer physical, but we're around to help you in your development, because we know it's difficult to be in the physical body on planet Earth. But for us, at our level of evolution, it's very difficult for us to take on a physical form. So we develop an appropriate body. In nature, all form follows function. So to house their energy, they had to develop very tall skeletal structure. And the elongated skull was to do with the fact that, humans require a big frontal lobe. We have to process information. But for them, they needed the rear section of the skull to communicate back where they came from. It was like a spiritual lobe. And it's the one part of the brain that today is the most mysterious. We still don't know enough about the rear portion of the human brain. So there is some truth that we're now beginning to figure out is based on science that comes originally from our connections through, or interaction through, psychic material. It's all coming together quite nicely.
Is the planet ready?
Oh, we've always been ready.
Well, you know what I'm saying. There is something very tangible right now going on.
Oh, it's very dangerous. And I think we're pretty close to hitting a critical mass.
Right.
But sometimes, as you know, if you look back through recent history, People in general require a bit of a push because they get complacent. They think that the next generation will take care of all the problems that we leave behind. And humans like to take it right up to the last second before they wake up. And sometimes the Earth has to hit them enough times, whether it's through climate change or through extreme politics, which is of our own making, to suddenly realize we're in the middle of big problems and we better wake up and get prepared and ride the changes elegantly, because they're upon us whether we like it or not. And I think that a lot of the problems that we're seeing now are really trying to get people to question the choices that we've made politically, religiously, and personally to accept what we've done and also find sensible solutions that will get us over the hurdle. I think we're going to get there. For example, there are these wonderful devices that were developed by a couple of young kids who went to desert climates, whether it's in the Sahara or New Mexico or Arizona, and they found that they created this very simple structure that looks like a kind of a wind chime made of metal with a big egg at the bottom, which you bury in the ground. Now, because of the difference in temperature in hot climates, because the metal structure is basically rapidly cooling after a long day out in the sun, in the morning, when you open that egg under the surface, you have 5 gallons of fresh water, literally picked out of nowhere. And they're selling this as a way for people in Africa with no money to have access to potable water. Now, that is a brilliant piece of forward thinking. And it's little things like this, little steps that are going to help us out of this conundrum. So we can't really see the whole thing as we see it in one big picture on social media every single day. We have to realize that our pockets, I don't want to call it resistance, I want to call them pockets of enlightenment everywhere. But because they don't really they don't sell newspapers, and I worked in the industry for 14 years to know that there's not a real conspiracy in the media unless you're working for the extreme left or the extreme right. They just want to sell newspapers. So unless you have conflict, the story doesn't sell. And you don't get to hear about good news. And there's a lot of good news going around if you just walk out of the house and go around the corner. I speak in Ohio quite regularly, or I used to. And I can't tell you how many towns I've been in Ohio where the halls are packed. In conservative Ohio, people come out of the woodwork doing exactly what we're doing right now, questioning where we've been, questioning what we're going to do and how we're going to change the outcome of our situation. And these pockets are all around the world. So we're in much better shape than we think. It's just that we're surrounded by this morass of bad news all the time. So as I always tell people, it's very important to keep track of what the snakes are up to. Okay, you can't just live on Earth and pretend nothing's happening. It doesn't affect you, because it does. So keep track of what the snakes are doing, and don't let it affect you. Only take charge of what you can handle and what you can affect through positive change, and then you control your environment around you and empower the people who have control of political systems or religious systems to get this change done at that level. That's the best you can do. Otherwise, if you take on all the problems of the world by yourself, you'll just get very depressed because you'll see that it's overwhelming. But it's not. You just take care of your little patch, influence someone around you, and that will have a knock-on effect. And I think that's how we're going to basically get out of this strange situation.
If the movement keeps going, and it's revealed that there has been some parallel civilization living here, this is the result of that.
Absolutely.
It's going to be Plato was right. Right? It's going to be it's going to be the Edfu text. You mean that was real? Right? That's where we're going to be. We're going to go back to the Sumerian text. And suddenly Sitchin wasn't so crazy.
We're the gods we've been waiting for. That's what the Hopi always joked about. The fact, and here's the irony, and I made this point, I believe it was at the end of The Missing Lands, because it's getting to very negative territory, and I thought there's got to be a light at the end of the tunnel of this book. And I actually made came to the same conclusion, that if we look back at history as a whole, through lens in time, and recognize that 11,000 years ago, it wasn't just humans that mostly died in the flood, it was also, according to the Egyptian texts, the divine inhabitants of the islands where the gods lived. And I've tracked them down to about 8 islands around the world, mostly underwater now. Now, wouldn't it be ironic that the very people that the gods that survived the flood, that then went on to the mainlands and certain parts of the world where humans mysteriously discovered civilization exactly at the same time in history, and then the gods disappear back into the sunset? Wouldn't it be amazing if 11,000 years later, half a turn of the cosmic wheel, we now are going to be in the same situation that we were in back then in climatically, but now instead of asking for outside help, we take all of this knowledge that we've been talking about today, we apply it, and now we do exactly what the gods did 11,000 years ago. That would be so poetic and so romantic, and it shows that we're the ones we've been waiting for all along. Doesn't mean to say we're alone. We're getting a lot of help. I mean, talk to the Zuni and the Hopi, and they'll say, well, if you want to come and sit here on this mesa, on February the 12th, I'm sure that the flying shields will be coming by and we're going to have a little chat with them, because that's what they're still doing, you see. So those people from off-world are still around, but they're also helping the people who they realize are kind of central to holding the information together, who have the integrity to maintain that information going. That's why they don't talk to governments, and that's why the governments are getting a little bit frightened, because, well, the aliens are here, we know they're here, but they're not talking to us. They're talking to people like, Jimmy or Freddie or the Hopi. And of course, that's why we're still alive as well, because they need us to write the books so it gets them to understand what's really going on. It's a bit of a cosmic joke that's going on here as well, I believe. And I kind of like the sound of it.
They need to go speak at Bilderberg. They need to go speak at Bilderberg. And now,
this guy is...
and to your point, Freddie, 11,000 years ago, if this advisement from council, right, happened, that's a different mindset from cultures back then, where they would be open to, could just consider these friends, right? Or would it be? But today, if that happened, would we be open to some? Look, domestication of wheat probably came from somebody, right? That idea
it just appeared like that out of nowhere.
Yeah, just out of. How about beer, right? Anyway, so which apparently just appeared. So if we move this now to 2022, where we think we're so smart, what would be the advice that we would need to listen to, right? If they did do the reappearing, what is it that we would have to listen to?
Oh, I think respect yourself, respect others as you respect yourself. It's not that difficult, really. And I suspect that most people probably go out and look at some landing spaceship and take their cell phones and start doing selfies. In fact, it wouldn't even be about the aliens, it would be about them. If you look at people behaving in art galleries all around the world when they go to look at impressive paintings, it's no longer a picture of the painting. It's about you in front of the painting. I think that actually no one would give a damn about the spaceship. They would actually want the picture of themselves on Instagram. I don't think it would really matter. I think it would only bother people who, A, think that they are in charge of everybody else and they have to be seen to maintain control, or two, some very people with distorted religious views that think there's only one God and that they have the keys to the civilization, which of course they don't. We all are part of this civilization. We're all children of a God or a creative source. We're all in this boat together. There would be the people who had the hardest time with that, because they cannot grasp the idea that there's something else out there, despite this endless amount of space and billions of stars and inert gases, that there is other civilizations going on, which goes back to, of course, to the rounds problem that we have is, well, how do we suddenly inherit these civilizations that come pre-packaged and show up from the middle of nowhere? There had to be a precedent. Someone else had to have tried it before, so that we just kept extending it, or it was just delivered to us from someone who had that information. And that information, of course, was the parallel civilization that the ancients keep talking about all the time. And they were very comfortable with them.
Now, last night we had Jason Quidd on, who, we love. Jason is amazing. And we were talking about the conspiracy of the Vatican vaults, right? The secret vaults. And what is it that the Catholic Church is in possession of and suppressing, and the stuff that will never, ever, and I'm saying never, will never see the light of day. Is this part of what they would know? Certainly, out of everything on this planet, the Catholic Church has been around the longest, and they've been collecting this information. Do you think that they are aware of everything that we're talking about right now?
I think they're aware of a lot of it. In fact, I came across this when I was researching the Lost Art of Resurrection. The fact that the church was trying desperately to understand what these principles of initiation and higher learning and higher consciousness were all about. But the mystery teachings were kept to relatively few people who would not let people into the understanding unless they had integrity. And of course, the church had no integrity. So what they got was the cliff notes. And they would murder people to extract information, but they would rather die than give the information away. The Templars are a classic example. They went to the graves protecting what they knew because they knew this information would be very difficult to handle. And also, it could be misconstrued and misused against the general population. So they protected it. So the church has all of these underground levels and reams of paper full of information, but they probably don't understand what the information is all about. They're lacking the important ingredient, which is the direct contact and the direct experience with all of these systems of knowledge and the people that brought this knowledge. And that's why they keep the paperwork going. It's a bit like the bank robber, stealing the money out of a bank vault, but then leading a paper trail back to the house. That's essentially what the Vatican is sitting on. It's the big paper trail. Otherwise, if it was that demonic, they would have destroyed it in the first place. I think they're as keen to find that as we are. That's my guess.
And yeah, I was talking to Jason last night after the show about this, and they have so much, right? Floors, vaults of stuff that they don't even know what they have.
Exactly.
They don't.
I'm just reading a book about the Inquisition and about there's one particular vault that it's six stories deep, and they're now beginning to get some breakthrough down to the third level. People who are fascinated about the record keeping of the Inquisition, and it's fascinating because they were so obsessed with minutiae, right down to who had sex with who, as part of the interrogation process that they could use against them. But it gives you a great snapshot of what was happening around Europe in the Middle Ages. So they're just again they're full of information, but I'm not sure that they know what they have. What they have in their actual vaults themselves. And I think they need to know. That's why they keep sort of trying to prod information from all of these wisdom keepers so that they can find the answer. But they don't have the answer any more than I or you have. In fact, we're probably way ahead of them at this point.
No, you're probably right about that. And there's also the language barrier, right?
Exactly.
How many variations of Aramaic and you would have to, or Sumerian text or whatever.
Perhaps we shouldn't have killed these people because now we can't read it. There's no one to translate it. It's like a Monty Python joke, really, isn't it? Okay, we'll kill all the people who speak Aramaic, but who's going to translate the Aramaic? Because that's where the real stuff is.
It's exactly the point.
It's a very sort of discombobulated bureaucratic system in the Vatican.
So what's up next for you? So Freddie and I, a few months ago, were hanging out on the West Coast. On the East Coast, and literally
for a second,
it could have been both. And you were immediately off, to do research in Europe, and you just got back. That's why you're on the show. But you're always doing stuff. And so, what's the next trip, and what are you working on?
I just finished actually today. I just launched my 14th documentary, "The Mystery of the Maya." So that's a brand new thing. I was very curious during my travels to Yucatan and Guatemala that we talk so much about the Maya. Again, another ancient culture, but you know what? There's another culture that came before them. Maya is not necessarily a people. It's a way of thinking. It's a kind of a religious system. And when enough people follow the same system, they become known by that system. So Maya is a way of being. It's a bit like Maori. There really is no such thing as Maori, according to a wisdom keeper that I spoke with. And he said, no, it's actually a way of being. Maori is a way of being, not a people. But enough people now take on that way of thinking, so we become Maori. And I found out that there's another culture that came before them called the Its. Hardly anyone has ever heard of these people.
What? Wait. The who?
The Its. No, not the who. The Its. And they came, and this is according to their sacred book, the Chilam Balam. They give an exact date of their arrival in Yucatan in 9600 BC. 100 years exactly to the day when the Great Flood took place, when it overran, they call it the waters of the ocean swallowed the fount of wisdom. So they were living on an island in the middle of the Atlantic called Atoll. And as the sea level kept rising, they got on their boats and they moved from stepping stone to stepping stone. And they found themselves in Yucatan. And their leader was called Itzamna. They were essentially magician priests. And he was one of 3 godmen who led 3 groups of wisdom keepers to restart civilization in that part of the world. Now, you know the other 2, Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl. And they were titles, by the way. They were not names. They were actually titles. And so the Itz started their civilization at Itzamal, which is a town in Yucatan that hardly anyone goes to, has the biggest pyramid in the whole of that region, and no one even knows it's there. And if they do, they go there, they climb it, and they go, wow, how come there's not more people here? Because no one ever talks about it. So I began to do this documentary based on years of traveling to the region and following the trail of the Itz all the way into Guatemala, through Palenque, through Tikal, and eventually they created a mirror copy of their original sunken homeland in the Atlantic in a lake called Atitlan in central Guatemala. That's why it's
you're making it up. You're making all this up, Freddie. You're doing it again.
Here to make up and a lot quicker to write. So that's what I've been working on.
ITS?
Phonetically, it's ITZ.
Get out of here.
So it's Zama. Water wizard, essentially, is what it translates to. So the people who came from the water who were wizards, magicians. Same stuff that you find. It's exactly a mirror copy of the followers of Horus in Egypt. And it described them physically in exactly the same way. Same group of 7 people, one of whom was a woman who's the wisdom keeper, who is married, and there's the sister to the leading 8th guy who's a charismatic leader. So this would have been Horus and his 7 group of people in Egypt. And they're linked together in Yucatan and Egypt by the same badge of office. They called them the people of the serpent, and their nickname was the shining people. So the followers of Horus, or the Aku Shemsuhor, were the shining ones, followers of Horus. So we're borrowing, again, from the same story on 2 opposite sides of the world. Now, to your point about Plato being right, Plato got his story from a guy called Solon, an academic who went off to Egypt. No one ever talks about Solon. It's always Plato that gets the accolade. Right. Go back to where the story came from. So Solon is having a little sojourn in Egypt, talking to the priests at Sais at the temple, and they said, it's actually a very funny moment. They said, you Greeks, you're too young as a civilization. Where have you been around like us Egyptians? We've been around so long that we've seen the sun set where it now rises and rise where it now sets. Because they said that at one point the earth was hit with something so big that it revolved in the wrong direction. And at one point, north or south, it tilted upside down. Well, the Hopi have exactly the same story. And they were saying that, there was this big civilization that lived on an island. One was way over there, and one was in the Indian Ocean. Now, I haven't found that one yet. But the one over there on the other big ocean, it went down 9,600 years before Solon's time. Well, that's exactly the same date that the Yucatec people talk about when the arrival of the people of the serpent happened in Yucatan. So the Egyptians had the same date for the same arrival, or at least the same sinking of the same island continent as the people in Yucatan do. You can't make that up. The 2 countries should never have actually shared information, but apparently they have the same story and they have the same date.
Now, Robert Schoch said to me one time in front of a large group of people, a couple of thousand people.
It's true.
Yeah, he said to me, Freddie, he goes, I'm not allowed to say the A word, and I'm not talking about aliens. I'm talking about Atlantis. And the more research that he does, this thing, now we call it Atlantis, but it is something, so pop culture, we call it Atlantis. And I feel that that's where you're going here when you say, Plato is right. and we've got a sunken island, and we've got this time. Is that where you're going? Are you going to drop the A word?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Atl, that's the original name and the oldest iteration of the name that we find in the Maya culture. And they're very adamant about it. They're very straightforward about it. That's where we get the Atlantic from. It's just a development of that culture. It's pretty obvious. And the fact is that they, from my research, I pinned them down to 8 islands around the world. This is where the gods all lived. And they were all forming part of a global ocean-going culture that was from this parallel civilization. I mean, that was the foundation for The Missing Lands, the last book. Because we always talk about the monuments that they built, no one ever asked the question, who were these people? What were they like? Where did they live? So that was like, another 8 years of research, asking questions to local people in strange places around the world and linking and putting these stories together. But the thing that really brought the whole story and connected the dots was asking what these names mean in their language. And that's when everything connected. So, for example, in Egypt, the Shining Ones follows a Horus, the Akushem Suhor. You go over to South America, to Tiwanaku, and the arrival of Viracocha and his 7 Hai Wapanti. Until you know Ayamara, you will not know that it means the Shining Ones. So it's Viracocha and his 7 Shining Ones. And they are described as very tall, elongated heads, red head, same as you find in Egypt, and same description as well. Again, major seafaring people. And from in South America, they appear to have come from an island called Kainga Nui Nui, which appears to have been between Easter Island and South America, now gone. While in Egypt, the description is of a seafaring people that came from somewhere north of Madagascar, somewhere in the Indian Ocean. It's a fragmented story, but if you read the Adfu text, there are certain sort of parameters there that give you an idea that back in the day, the Nile Valley had access into the Red Sea and into the Indian Ocean. They talk about a time when the ocean extended all the way to Ethiopia from Cairo. So, and again, why would they make this stuff up? So they're saying that it came from the land, from the sea, from the south. So that's another island there that we don't know anything about. It may have been somewhere near in the region of the Arabian Peninsula. I found a wisdom keeper on an island called Tuanake in the middle of nowhere, just north of the Cook Islands. And he's the last wisdom keeper. I think he just passed away recently, and he gladly gave me what he knew for the book, because he said, someone's got to write this down because it's going to die with me. I said, okay. And he said, about 3000 BC, there was a group of people here who lived here who gave their name to the island called Tuanake. And I said, well, that sounds very much like Anunnaki. I said, yeah, you called them the Anunnaki, and they were here in 3000 BC, again after a big sea level rise at that particular time, which is absolutely true. So my question to him was, are you saying that the Anunnaki survived all of these thousands of years in the Middle East through Sumeria and through the Armenian highlands, and they eventually developed seafaring ability, and they moved to the Cook Islands and said, absolutely, I've got the entire genealogy mapped out here, but I got no one to tell the story to. So that was an incredible moment of putting this information into writing for the first time in history, that these people were still surviving thousands of years later.
I got a Silva degree tonight. I mean, if
heavily, Jimmy, it keeps you grounded. And again, you don't have to make anything up. You just follow the trail of information from the lips of the people who lived this stuff. That's all you have to do, and just sit back and watch. And I guess I can do this. I thought most people could do this, but I guess they can't. I can see the connections out of the corner of my eye, because that's what I used to do for a living. I used to take bits and pieces of information when I was a creative director in advertising, and I used to distill that into a coherent message. Well, I just reapplied that into my research and take that bit, and realize, oh, these things are actually connected. All you have to do is listen to what they're trying to tell you.
It seems simple, but we've got to figure out a way to knock people over their heads. I'm serious. And the thing is, Freddie, when somebody who doesn't want to and are closed off, they listen to a show like this, and if they're on the other side of the fence, all this does is cement their belief system. It doesn't open their minds up. It forces them into a stronger position. It strengthens where they are at. And we have to figure out a way to get these minds open. And I don't know if it's a club. I don't know if it's a stick. Right? And I know you get what I'm saying. It's so frustrating.
Because not everybody's here at the same level of development, and certainly not at the same level of spiritual development. Some people get it and some people don't, but that's the way it's always been, and that's the way it's always going to be. The trick is to reach a point where you reach a critical mass. I'm not talking about 51%. I'm talking about way less than that, for a certain group of people to see something that really makes a lot of sense and is of benefit to the greater whole. And then whether they like it or not, they can either follow that trend or they'll just, like lemmings, go over the cliff. And that's the way it's always been throughout history. There's been a group of people that have tried to hold on to a specific idea, which turns out at the end of the day was just a construct in their imagination, which had no resemblance to any reality around them. And they're lost. They're the ones who end up dying. And everybody else just gets on with their lives and moves forward. That's the way it's always going to be. You can never convince everybody. So the best you can do is, like Gandhi once said, and I do miss him because he had the best quotes. He said, just tend to your garden, show by example your garden. Your neighbor on your left will go, that's a really great idea. The way you just put the manure around this this design and arrange things geometrically actually makes the food taste better and it grows faster. I think I'll do that. And the next guy on your right will want to burn your house down because he doesn't believe what you've just done. But that's okay. But at least you've influenced one person. And that's the best you can do. But at least at the end of the day, you live within yourself, within your means. And you also you're true to yourself. We tend to spend so much time and money going to conferences and reading books and going online and watching documentaries, including my own. But most of these things are very simple truths when you come down to it. And after 25 years of doing this, I come down to some very simple truths about life and how to live life properly. Doesn't mean to say it's any easier. I think it's still difficult because it's a personal journey. But once you understand these simple truths, so much of the weight is lifted from your shoulders. If you can just accept that you came here and you don't know why you came here, but you're here because you chose to be here for a certain reason, and accept that everything that happens to you that's good or bad is to shape you as a person, and you end up dying one day, hopefully better than when you arrived. If you can just accept that without believing me, your life, I guarantee you, will be 90% easier from tomorrow, because it's happened to me as well. All I have to do is accept that I chose this for a reason. I don't know why, but you know what? If I can take responsibility for that, suddenly my whole posture is like, well, I feel much better about that. I can take it on the chin when times are bad and accept the good things when times are good. But you ride the wave elegantly, with good poise, just like the ancestors used to do. Is there a big tidal wave crossing Australia? Yes, there is. Well, let's gather some food, go to high ground, and then we'll protect ourselves and help those that can't protect themselves. And then when the water goes back out, we'll continue better than we were before, and we're much more aware of how to, evolve from that situation. That's the way it's always been, Jimmy.
The book is a fantastic read. I've gone through it now 3 times. Scotland's Hidden Sacred Past. It's a great book. Please, everybody, visit invisibletemple.com. Freddie Silva, you're the absolute very best, man. Thank you so much.
Upon this church, I build my rock.
Freddie Silva, thank you so much, my friend, and enjoy the rest of your night.
Likewise. Thanks, Jimmy.
Freddie Silva, and what a great, perfect show tonight. And again, the book is an amazing read, and I want everybody to visit invisibletemple.com. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What a great show tonight. Tomorrow night is Fader Night with open lines all night long. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Kevin. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitola, Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboys, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is owned and copyrighted 2022 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow's Thursday, which means it's Fader Night. It's open lines all night long. Until then, I want everybody to be safe It's time to fade to black.